C'est plaisant que ça arrive quand tout le monde est silencieux. Puis j'avertis la personne qui va passer après moi, le micro est descendu le plus bas possible. Donc, vous aurez besoin de vous ajuster. Petite vérification, est-ce qu'en ligne aussi on m'entend? Parce qu'on a eu des problèmes avec ça l'année passée. C'est bon? Parfait. Alors, bonjour à tous. Je vois qu'il y a encore des gens, dans le corridor, mais je vous invite à prendre place. On va commencer. Alors, bonjour tous et bienvenue à cette 4e édition du séminaire annuel sur la fiabilité qui est organisée par la Régie de l'énergie. Alors, pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas, je suis Sophie Giner, directrice générale adjointe, surveillance et projets spéciaux à la Régie de l'énergie. Ce matin, on fait des spéciaux, on a des nouveaux amis qui travaillent avec nous, alors on les a amenés. Je vous présente d'ailleurs Monsieur Philippe Doyon, notre nouveau directeur général qui planification et réglementation, qui se cache derrière la colonne. Monsieur Benjamin Bourque, notre responsable des coms. Et c'est lui qui va d'ailleurs prendre des photos. Alors, si jamais il y a un souci, vous nous faites signe si vous ne souhaitez pas être pris en photo. Je suis également accompagnée de mon équipe habituelle que je vais prier de se lever parce que vous communiquez souvent avec eux par écrit. Alors, ça vaut la peine que vous voyez de qui il s'agit. Donc, Madame Laurentia Dumitrescu, Madame Anne-Marie Sauvageau, Monsieur Philippe Héroux et Monsieur Christian Cruz-Sanchez, auxquels nous devons plus particulièrement l'organisation du présent séminaire. Alors, sont également avec nous ce matin Madame Mireille Leroux, que vous avez vue à l'entrée, et Monsieur Gouinou Drouin. Ils vous ont accueillis et ils vont nous aider pour les questions tout à l'heure. Alors, je suis vraiment très heureuse de vous voir si nombreux, puis je remercie tout particulièrement de leur présence nos distingués présentateurs de la journée. Donc, il y aura Laurentia, Monsieur Jason Wong, Cecil Ely, Daniel Kidney, Matthew Forrest, tous les 4 du NPCC, Jessie Sight de ISAC, Maxime Doucet d'Innovae, mais je ne crois pas qu'elle soit arrivée, Latrice Harkness de la NERC, Michel Garceau du FRQ et Christian, qui sera là tout à l'heure aussi, qui fera une présentation. Alors, vous entendrez aujourd'hui parler des obligations des entités visées au Québec, des attentes que nous avons envers vous lorsque vous déclarez des non-conformités, des outils qui vous sont offerts, de certaines normes nouvelles ou de normes à venir, qu'elles soient en lien ou pas avec les ressources énergétiques distribuées. Vous entendrez également parler de GridEx, de fiabilité et des bourses du FRQ, ainsi que des activités futures qui sont prévues par le comité d'utilisation des sanctions. Mais surtout, vous entendrez parler de fiabilité du réseau de transport. Et là, je suis sincère quand je le dis, c'est le domaine le plus passionnant qui soit. Et vous pourrez établir des liens avec d'autres entités visées qui ne sont pas que des compétiteurs. Les gens que je vois ici ce matin partagent les mêmes objectifs et vivent les mêmes réalités. Alors, merci sincèrement d'être ici ou de nous suivre en ligne. J'espère que vous m'entendez en ligne. Alors, avant de débuter, quelques points d'intendance. En cas d'incendie ou d'évacuation de l'immeuble, je vous invite à sortir par en avant ou par en arrière et de suivre les pancartes marquées sorties. Pour les sorties d'urgence, il y a d'ailleurs une sortie d'urgence juste ici. On reste calme. Vous savez que c'est le temps des exercices de feu, fait que je me méfie. Il y a un service d'interprétation simultanée qui est offert du français vers l'anglais et vice-versa pour entendre les présentations dans la langue de votre choix. Christian, est-ce que ça fonctionne avec... Bon, parfait. Alors, pour les participants sur place, vous pouvez utiliser les casques qui sont fournis à l'entrée par Encore, qui est notre fournisseur multimédia, ou en utilisant l'application mobile Interprofy sur votre cellulaire avec vos propres écouteurs. Dans ce dernier cas, je vous invite à utiliser le code QR qui est transmis dans votre invitation Outlook. Et puis, pour les participants virtuels, vous pouvez choisir la langue de votre choix en cliquant sur l'icône du globe, l'icône interprétation qui est sur Zoom. Ça me semblait être du chinois, mais j'imagine que si vous êtes un peu moins technouille que moi, vous comprenez ce que je viens de dire. Il y aura une période de questions d'environ 5 minutes à la suite de chacune des présentations. On va d'abord écouter les questions de la salle et à cette fin, je vous prie de lever la main afin que Mireille ou Gouinou puissent vous donner le micro. Nous passerons ensuite aux questions qui viennent des participants en virtuel et vous pouvez, participants du virtuel, inscrire vos questions dans la section Q&A sur Zoom. Christian se chargera de lire ces questions au présentateur ou à la présentatrice. Si d'aventure on ne pouvait pas répondre sur place à vos questions, nous vous assurons que nous ferons tout notre possible après l'événement pour vous répondre rapidement et pour rendre ces réponses disponibles à l'ensemble des participants. Alors, je vous prie de bien vous identifier sur Zoom si jamais vous avez une question qui vous concerne très particulièrement. Enfin, après le séminaire, on va vous faire suivre un sondage qui va vous permettre d'apprécier nos efforts, les miens surtout, et de nous faire connaître vos besoins et votre opinion. Prenez le temps de compléter ce sondage. Vous y remarquerez également une petite question qui est relative à notre application de dépôt, le SSCQ. Sachez que nous débutons en ce moment un exercice de refonte et de mise à jour de cet outil précieux. Alors, n'hésitez pas à vous exprimer à ce sujet si jamais vous aviez une préoccupation. C'est une dernière chance de vous faire connaître, votre opinion avant qu'on débute les travaux à proprement parler. Alors, sans plus tarder, j'invite Laurentia à s'avancer pour la première présentation de la journée. Benjamin, tasse-toi. Merci. Bon séminaire, bonne journée.
Alors, 1, 2, 3, je pense que la salle m'entend. Bonjour, Laurentia Dumitrescu, spécialiste en régulation économique. Oups. Bon, je débute le séminaire avec probablement un sujet que plusieurs d'entre vous considèrent un déjà-vu. Personnellement, je trouve que le rappel de quelques notions de base est important, surtout dans un contexte de changement de personnel ou à la lumière des échanges que l'équipe surveillance de la conformité aux normes de fiabilité a eu durant ces derniers temps. Je trouve que le fait de prendre un moment afin d'écouter ce qui nous semble familier ne peut que solidifier les notions de base et vous incitera d'aller un pas en avant et d'améliorer encore plus certaines de vos façons de faire. Je présenterai donc les obligations des entités visées par le régime obligatoire de normes de fiabilité au Québec. Voici le plan de la présentation qui, après l'introduction, entrera dans le sujet principal, à savoir les obligations des entités visées. Les entités rempliront leurs obligations au cours des activités de surveillance, ou également appelées exercices de conformité. Je présenterai ces exercices de surveillance et d'application des normes ainsi que les interactions entre les diverses parties prenantes, les entités visées, l'équipe surveillance de la conformité aux normes, la Régie de l'énergie et le Northeast Power Connecting Council, pour lequel j'utiliserai l'acronyme le NPCC durant la présentation. Au 4e point, je passerai en revue les étapes du processus de déclaration de non-conformité dans le but de récapituler les actions à prendre et surtout les interventions à privilégier par les entités visées. Je présenterai les étapes intermédiaires entre la déclaration de non-conformité par une entité visée et la décision finale rendue par la Régie dans un dossier de non-conformité. Comme d'habitude, je finirai la présentation avec une période de questions. Alors, comme je vous mentionnais tantôt, je commence par les notions de base. Et je vous rappelle que pour avoir un régime obligatoire de normes, il faut 3 pierres d'assises étroitement liées, qui sont les normes de fiabilité, la première pierre. Ce sont les documents comprenant des exigences qui doivent être respectées. Conformément à l'article 85.7 de sa loi constitutive, la Régie adopte les normes de fiabilité et fixe la date de leur entrée en vigueur. À la diapositive suivante, je mentionnerai le 2e document qui, au Québec, fait partie intégrante d'une norme. Ensuite, on a beau avoir des normes. S'il n'y a pas d'entreprise au Québec à les respecter. Toutes les entreprises? Non, évidemment, ce sont les entreprises qui possèdent et exploitent des installations auxquelles les normes sont applicables. Où est-ce que l'on retrouve toutes ces entités? Dans le registre des entités visées par les normes de fiabilité, document qui est déposé à la Régie pour approbation. Et finalement, afin d'assurer le respect des normes, il faut prévoir des moyens. Ce sont les sanctions appliquées en cas de non-respect. Le document présentant les principes et les critères à considérer pour imposer des sanctions lorsqu'il y a eu contravention à une norme de fiabilité et le guide des sanctions relatif à l'application des normes de fiabilité au Québec. Un régime obligatoire s'appuie donc sur les normes de fiabilité, les entités visées et sur le guide des sanctions. Un autre rappel important, tous les documents, normes, registres, guide des sanctions, tout autre document en lien avec la surveillance et l'application, les versions en vigueur des normes ou de différents documents, ainsi que les versions antérieures, sont affichées à la section Entités visées, normes de fiabilité du site web de la Régie. C'est une section que moi et mes collègues mettons à jour régulièrement, section qui ne cesse d'évoluer afin d'offrir les informations pertinentes et d'actualité, mais également une meilleure expérience utilisateur du site. Je vous invite à prendre connaissance de la capsule réglementaire présentée dans l'édition 2022 du Séminaire, capsule portant sur l'adoption et la mise en vigueur d'une norme au Québec. La particularité est la présence d'une annexe, ou l'annexe Québec, c'est le deuxième document que je mentionnais tantôt. L'annexe Québec est un document adopté par la Régie qui comporte des dispositions particulières en ce qui a trait au réseau de transport électrique au Québec, faisant partie intégrante d'une norme de fiabilité. Pour les fins de cette présentation, quand je réfère à une norme, je réfère en même temps à l'annexe Québec de la norme. Toujours aux fins de cette présentation, je réfère uniquement aux normes en vigueur parce qu'à ce moment, elles entrent dans la mire de l'équipe surveillance ou plus court dans la surveillance. C'est à compter de ce moment, quand elles sont en vigueur, que l'on doit s'assurer de leur respect. Afin de déterminer l'applicabilité d'une norme de fiabilité à une entité, il faut considérer deux entrants. Le premier entrant est le modèle fonctionnel de la NERC qui définit les fonctions remplies par les entités visées. Parmi ces fonctions, on y retrouve le propriétaire d'installation de production, dont l'acronyme est GO, l'exploitant d'installation de production, dont l'acronyme est GOP, le propriétaire d'installation de transport, dont l'acronyme est TO, pour un total de 12 fonctions. Le deuxième entrant est l'identification des installations du réseau de transport principal. Les normes associent les fonctions et les installations aux exigences. Toute personne intéressée, ou plus précisément toute entité visée, peut prendre connaissance des normes en vigueur, étant donné qu'elles sont affichées sur le site web de la Régie, comme je mentionnais tantôt. Le registre identifie les entités visées, les fonctions, les 12 fonctions GO, GOP, TO et ainsi de suite, et les installations. Toute entité visée, toutes les entités visées sont ainsi en mesure d'identifier les normes qui leur sont applicables. L'exigence s'applique à une fonction et à une installation. Si l'entité remplit la fonction et possède l'installation, alors l'exigence de la norme en question lui est applicable. Quand on parle des normes de fiabilité, les entreprises auxquelles les normes sont applicables deviennent des entités visées. Le registre est mis à jour de façon récurrente dans un dossier qui est déposé autour du 1er décembre de chaque année, mais il peut être également déposé dans un dossier réglementaire d'adoption de normes. Quant au guide des sanctions, il a été adopté dans la phase 2 du dossier réglementaire R3699 et il est en vigueur depuis le 1er novembre 2016. Passons maintenant au deuxième point de la présentation où je rappellerai les obligations des entités visées. On entre donc au cœur du sujet. Normalement, Je débute par l'obligation de se conformer aux normes applicables. Et j'ai présenté tantôt le processus d'identification d'une norme applicable à une entité. Il y a des cas où une ou des installations visées par les normes peuvent être vendues par leur propriétaire ou lorsqu'une entité change de nom. Eh bien, peu importe les raisons du changement du nom ou de propriétaire, l'obligation de se conformer aux normes demeure si l'entité change de nom ou elle est reprise par le nouveau propriétaire dès l'acquisition de l'installation. Je n'entre pas dans les clauses d'un contrat, parce que cela sort du sujet de cette présentation. Cependant, il serait important que le nouveau propriétaire prenne connaissance de la posture de conformité ainsi que de l'historique en matière de conformité de la nouvelle entité, et cela le plus rapidement possible. Je laisse à la latitude du nouveau propriétaire le moment opportun. Une autre obligation à remplir est l'heure des manquements aux normes. Et cela s'applique à un nouveau propriétaire ou à un autre qui possède l'installation depuis plusieurs années. Conformément à l'article 300 du programme de surveillance de la conformité et d'application des normes de fiabilité du Québec, connu sous l'acronyme PSAQ, une entité visée est incitée à déposer une déclaration de non-conformité dès qu'elle constate qu'elle ne se conforme pas ou pourrait ne pas s'être conformée à une norme de fiabilité. Je réitère l'importance de remplir une déclaration de non-conformité par exigence. Un peu plus tard, je présenterai quelles sont les méthodes de disposition ou de résolution en cas de non-conformité. Je vous expliquerai également pourquoi il est important que l'entité se déclare non conforme et qu'elle n'attend pas qu'elle soit visée par un exercice de conformité. On continue avec les obligations. Bon, lorsqu'il y a un dépôt d'une déclaration de non-conformité, c'est qu'il y a un problème. On veut corriger cette situation, on ne veut pas qu'elle perdure. Comment la corriger? Il faut que l'entité soit de retour à la conformité le plus rapidement possible. Ici, j'insiste sur une autre étape importante dans le régime obligatoire, la mise en œuvre de mesures de redressement ou d'atténuation ou, si demandé par le NPCC, la mise en œuvre d'un plan de redressement. Le retour à la conformité peut prendre du temps. On est tous conscients que certaines activités demandent de la coordination. Elles peuvent comprendre l'acquisition d'un outil ou du matériel. Bref, elles prennent du temps. Là où les mesures de redressement, si elles adressent là où les causes fondamentales de la non-conformité, peuvent réduire, voire minimiser le risque posé à la fiabilité du réseau par l'entité visée. Si l'entité met en œuvre les mesures de redressement, elle doit également avoir de la documentation qui démontre qu'elle est conforme ou son parcours pour être de retour à la conformité. Vous avez sûrement entendu la remarque suivante attribuée aux auditeurs. Si ce n'est pas documenté, cela n'a pas été fait. Il faut toujours avoir les documents prêts. Mais il pourrait y avoir des situations où les entités ont besoin de plus de temps pour les fournir. Dans ces situations, demandez des délais additionnels. Combien? Un nombre raisonnable de reports de date pour des raisons pertinentes. Et oui, une autre obligation est celle de fournir à la régie, plus précisément à l'équipe surveillance, les coordonnées des personnes ressources à jour. Comme la plupart des entités savent, à chaque début d'année, l'équipe surveillance transmet une lettre aux entités visées afin qu'elles fournissent ces données. Il est également important de nous aviser de tout changement à la désignation des personnes ressources au cours de l'année, surtout dans le cas où l'entité visée est sujette à un exercice de conformité. Je continue avec les obligations. Quand je parlais tantôt qu'une entité doit fournir la documentation démontrant sa conformité à la norme, cette documentation doit être déposée dans l'entrepôt de données, connu sous l'acronyme SSCQ pour le Système de surveillance de la conformité au Québec. Il sert au dépôt des documents en lien avec la surveillance, avec l'application des normes. Pour qu'une entité dépose des documents dans le SSCQ, elle doit également indiquer les utilisateurs qui devront accéder en transmettant à l'équipe surveillance leur nom et courriel. Vous avez à l'écran le courriel où une entité peut transmettre ces informations. Il est important de rappeler que l'équipe surveillance laisse à la discrétion de l'entité le nombre de personnes ayant accès au SSCQ, ni trop ni peu, étant donné que les entités connaissent mieux leurs besoins en matière d'accès au SSCQ. Les demandes d'accès et surtout de retrait doivent toujours être faites par la première personne ressource. On veut avoir un seul point de contact pour justement mieux gérer ces demandes. La raison est simple, parce que l'information qui est déposée dans le SSCQ est non publique et doit être conservée de manière sécuritaire. Je me suis dit qu'il vaut mieux parsemer la présentation avec des conseils que j'ai appelés bonnes pratiques et qui sont inspirés des échanges que l'équipe surveillance a eus durant toutes ces années. Vous pouvez les inclure dans un aide-mémoire ou dans votre programme de conformité. Si vous les appliquez déjà, continuez dans la même direction. Le cas contraire, donnez-les suite et mettez-les en pratique. Ils ne peuvent qu'améliorer vos processus en matière de surveillance. L'important est qu'elles ne restent pas lettres mortes. Bien que ces pratiques vous semblent peut-être inutiles de les répéter, en plus de les inclure dans une présentation, elles ne cessent d'être d'actualité, dans un contexte de changement de personnel avec lequel chaque entité visée se conforme. J'ai passé en revue les obligations des entités visées. Maintenant, je continue avec le troisième point de la présentation. Je vais aller un peu plus vite parce que mon collègue me fait signe qu'il me reste encore 5 minutes. Bon, vous avez à droite les exercices de surveillance prévus selon le plan d'action du PSAQ, les approches non prévues. Si jamais il y a des questions, je vais pouvoir retourner à cette diapositive. Bon. Parce que je parlais du plan d'action, je voudrais juste vous mentionner, je vous donner un aperçu des étapes franchies à date. Le 1er octobre, le NPCC a transmis déjà une première ébauche de ce plan à la NERC. À son tour, l'équipe surveillance initiera des discussions avec le NPCC une fois les commentaires de la NERC reçus et le dépôt formel du plan à la Régie. Bon, je continue avec l'approche visant l'application des normes prévues selon le plan d'action, qui est le dépôt d'une déclaration de non-conformité. Je vais juste insister sur le fait qu'il faut donner un peu plus de détails dans la déclaration de non-conformité initiale et éventuellement dans les pièces justificatives déposées pour démontrer votre retour à la conformité. Pour plus de détails, sur le contenu de la déclaration de non-conformité, vous pouvez vous référer à la présentation donnée l'année dernière par le NPCC portant sur le traitement des non-conformités. Conclusion, il faut que les mesures de redressement soient efficaces. Elles doivent corriger le problème, éliminer là où les causes fondamentales et empêcher le problème de se reproduire. Et oui, toujours comme bonne pratique, il est préférable que l'entité se déclare elle-même non conforme avant d'être trouvée fautive par des auditeurs lors d'un exercice de surveillance. Pourquoi? Dans la situation où la non-conformité est découverte durant l'audit ou déclarée par l'entité après la réception de l'avis d'audit, l'entité visée pourrait recevoir moins de crédits ou certains facteurs d'atténuation de la non-conformité ne seront pas pris en considération lors du traitement de la non-conformité et, le cas échéant, de l'établissement de la sanction pécuniaire. Bon. Je vais essayer de réduire le plus possible. Bon, vous avez le cheminement ici d'une déclaration de non-conformité. Le tout commence lorsque l'entité se déclare elle-même non conforme ou lorsqu'une non-conformité est décelée à la suite d'un exercice de surveillance. Bon, il s'ensuit l'évaluation de la non-conformité par le NPCC. Il pourrait y avoir 3 méthodes de résolution. La première, lorsque la non-conformité s'avère non fondée, c'est la case verte. Il y a un avis d'absence de non-conformité émis par le groupe application des normes du NPCC. La deuxième méthode est lorsque la non-conformité pose un risque peu élevé à la fiabilité du réseau de transport d'électricité. Dans ce cas, le NPCC recommande à la régie que la non-conformité soit résolue par procédure simplifiée. Dans ce cas, il n'y a pas de sanction pécuniaire, mais la non-conformité est inscrite au dossier de l'entité. Et la troisième méthode, le rouge, c'est quand le groupe application des normes du NPCC envoie un avis de non-conformité lorsque les non-conformités posent un risque élevé à la fiabilité du réseau de transport d'électricité. Il s'ensuit des discussions entre le NPCC et l'entité visée. Ce chemin est préférable et souhaitable parce que lorsque l'entité choisit de ne pas contester là où les non-conformités dans le cadre d'une audience devant la régie, le montant de la sanction pourrait être réduit dans l'entente de règlement final. Il va y avoir à la fin des discussions un projet de règlement entre le NPCC, le groupe application des normes, et l'entité visée. C'est en fait une entente de règlement qui est signée par les dirigeants des deux parties. L'entente est signée, mais elle doit être approuvée par la régie. Qui a la régie? C'est toujours un régisseur. Alors, le NPCC transmet à la régie l'entente pour l'approbation. C'est toujours l'équipe surveillance qui prend l'entente, l'avis, elle prépare la trousse pour le bureau d'application des normes. C'est qui le bureau? Je vais aller un peu à la page, à la diapositive suivante. Bon, vous avez la case rouge, c'est le bureau. Voici la case dédiée au bureau. Lui, le bureau est composé d'un procureur externe qui analyse le dossier transmis par la DGA SPS. Je retourne. Donc, le bureau dépose le dossier d'application auprès du secrétariat de la régie. Le secrétaire avise le président de l'ouverture d'un dossier d'application et le président désigne la formation au dossier qui rendra une décision d'application motivée. C'est la case correspondant à la décision de la régie. Bon, depuis 2019, il y a eu 7 décisions d'application qui ont été rendues. Et en 2024, oui, il y a 3 dossiers déposés à la régie et en cours de traitement. Donc, la DGA SPS a transmis déjà les 3 trousses au bureau et nous sommes en attente de la décision d'application. Bon. Je suis vers la fin. Bon. Il arrive parfois, j'ai une seule chose à vous mentionner. Ça, c'est important pour la fermeture de non-conformité parce qu'il arrive parfois que lors du dépôt des pièces justificatives dans le SSCQ, les entités modifient certaines cases de la déclaration de non-conformité. Ce n'est pas souhaitable étant donné que la déclaration initiale sert uniquement comme point de départ dans le processus d'évaluation. Il est préférable que les entités déposent la déclaration initiale, mais qu'elles ne la modifient pas par la suite. Ni l'entité, ni le NPCC ne peuvent fermer une non-conformité. Un dossier de non-conformité est fermé lorsque la régie approuve la recommandation du NPCC en ce qui a trait à la méthode de résolution de la non-conformité. Et c'est le slide que tout le monde attend. C'est la période de questions. Je vous remercie pour votre attention. Est-ce qu'on a des questions dans la salle?
Ce que je comprends, c'est que lorsqu'il y a une non-conformité, une DNCR qui aurait été déposée, puis que par la suite, il y aurait eu des modifications à y apporter, ou on ne doit pas effectuer ces modifications-là?
Dans le système de surveillance de la conformité au Québec, il y a un formulaire qui ne doit pas être modifié, celui-là. Communiquer avec le NPCC sur la manière dont vous voulez faire des modifications sur les éventuelles déclarations de non-conformité. Si le NPCC accepte, vous pouvez le faire. Si le NPCC demande que des preuves soient déposées, suivez le conseil du NPCC. C'est juste dans le système de surveillance, le formulaire qui vient avec le mandat correspondant. Je pense qu'on peut passer à la deuxième présentation du séminaire. Je vais inviter M. Jason Wong, directeur application des normes et mesures d'atténuation du NPCC, de nous présenter les attentes du groupe application des normes dans le cadre du processus de déclaration de non-conformité.
Just realized you had two stands over here. This is my best side anyways. All right, two things here. Hello, thank you for having me with you all today. I've watched last year's translated YouTube videos and can understand if some jokes don't translate so well. So I'll keep them to a minimum, but just keep in mind that I was very tempted. My name is Jason Wang, and I'm the Director of Enforcement and Mitigation. So, I wanted to start things off by giving you a valuable resource if you're new to NPCC compliance. We've worked extremely hard to come up with a recorded 101 webinar and have presented on the compliance fundamentals on several occasions. Laurentia just went through the compliance fundamentals as well. So I'm really hoping that, with the limited amount of time we have today, I'd rather focus on getting you up to date and building on the things that we talked about last year, as well as like the fundamentals. So again, last year, Melissa Prasad presented on the enforcement essentials. The recording can be found in the link at the bottom of this slide. But it essentially covered these three topics. What is the philosophy of enforcement? What is it that we are focused on? And what is it that we are trying to accomplish when it comes to evaluating noncompliance? The second part is the contents of a self-report. Some common issues we see in self-reports and how you as an entity can better tell the story when reporting noncompliance. And then the third aspect was what happens when an enforcement team member receives a noncompliance report, and how that member determines the disposition track. Again, I'm hoping to build upon these topics that were already presented last year. And then I want to gear the future topics based on what you're interested in hearing about today. There were a few questions posed during last year's session that really helped give me ideas as to what I should be presenting to you guys today. So again, today I'm going to be going over enforcement expectations. Here's the brief description if you don't have it in your package. It's to provide insight into the necessary details to facilitate an efficient and cooperative enforcement engagement. This will include how enforcement looks at scope, risk, and mitigation. Before I get too deep into the enforcement expectations, I wanted to show you a little bit about why we are doing this. The graph you see before you is from the NERC Public CMAP report, and it's focused on 2014 to 2019. So you'll notice that there's an extreme jump of reported noncompliance from 2016 to 2017. The higher number of incoming noncompliance continues today. So why did the number of noncompliance increase so significantly between those 2 years? Put in on the right-hand side, also coming from the annual CMEP report, NERC kind of gives a little bit of a hint. So that highlighted portion, which it's a little bit yellow right there, it specifically says approximately 75% of all newly discovered noncompliance in the first half of 2017 involved reliability standards that have gone into effect since July 2016. So what standards came into effect in 2016, early 2017? And the straightforward answer is that version 5 of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Standards, or CIP v5, became enforceable. CIP v5 became enforceable in the US on July 1st, 2016, and in Quebec, January 1st, 2017. So you see that gigantic jump in 2016 and 2017, right? So with such a jump in reported noncompliance, we either had to double our staff or we had to innovate. Not sure about your organizations, but obviously we chose to innovate. So to come up with an innovative solution, we had to identify the specific problem we had. We noticed that most of our incoming noncompliance were focused around 10 specific standards. Also, the most amount of time spent processing noncompliance was the communication back and forth between us and you. Our innovative solution was to create a series of expectations called enforcement approaches that we've been utilizing as a baseline to evaluate your noncompliance. So enforcement approaches were made by sampling 15 years of publicly filed noncompliance, categorizing common risk criteria, and then adding our own regional specific details, and then documenting the results. We consider all enforcement approaches as drafts because we are constantly seeing new situations and therefore new criteria to help justify our final determinations. In the short term, we use the enforcement approaches for initial requests for information. The long-term goal back in 2022 was to make these enforcement approaches as self-report templates. This year, we're trying to complete that goal. It would be really nice to have a self-report just specifically geared to the violation that you are encountering and have questions related to that specific violation. Especially for those of you that don't have the resources to memorize all the pages in the NERC self-report and mitigation guidance, we want to have a self-report specifically for, a PRC5 violation that says, all right, if you're in violation of R1 or R5, it'll be specific to that requirement rather than being very, open and saying, just describe what your noncompliance is or what your risk is for that particular thing. So ultimately, our goal is to set expectations and cut down the back and forth between us. So you're probably asking yourself, why would I self-report? And secondly, why would I want to give our regulator more information up front? Well, the answer is twofold. This particular industry is very focused on reliability. Self-reporting allows your organization to identify a problem, mitigate the problem, and prevent recurrence. Additionally, you can see the specific language in the sanction guidelines relating to self-reporting and the degree and quality of your cooperation. To summarize, the Régie has given incentives to provide this information upfront by self-reporting. The self-reporting incentives disappear when you're audited and the noncompliance is found through an audit. I think Laurentia talked about that earlier. So about 75% of you are registered as generation owners, which means there's only a specific subset of NERC reliability standards that are applicable to you. This is probably why Patrick Palumbo presented on FAC 8 last year, since it's applicable to the majority of you and it's a highly visible standard, meaning that all the regulatory bodies put an emphasis on facility ratings in the reliable operation of the bulk power system. As a quick refresher, I've provided the common themes he presented. I'm not going to read them off to you since you can review them from last year's presentation, but all these themes can or has led to some sort of enforcement engagement. These themes or common causes to FAC 8 noncompliance will lead you to self-report. Next, we'll go into what is it that enforcement is expecting once you find a noncompliance, using FAC 8 as an example. So again, since the majority of you are registered as generator owners, I'm really only going to focus on FAC 8 R1. For every single FAC 8 R1 noncompliance, we must determine the requirement or requirement part that was failed. Furthermore, we must determine the specific deficiency within the requirement. For example, we see that entities use the general statement that they use ratings provided by their equipment manufacturer. However, let's say we found that you use an engineering analysis consistent with industry standards for one piece of equipment, but your documentation doesn't support that inclusion. Enforcement will determine a noncompliance of Part R1.1 and include each piece of equipment that was not included in the documentation as within the scope. The mitigation is to include the piece of equipment in the documentation and update your facility ratings methodology. So this is the first thing that you will need to include in your self-report. Again, for a complete list of other things to include, like root cause or basis for dates, please watch Melissa's presentation from last year that has all of the basics of what needs to go into a complete self-report. I'm really focusing on what our expectations are. So next up in a good FAC 8 R1 self-report is describing the risk, which can be very subjective. Specifically, only for R1, we'll be asking the following questions based on the failure statement. If the R1 noncompliance results in actual deficient facility ratings, we'll be asking questions related to R6, because that's the deficient facility ratings requirement. But for the purposes of this example, we'll keep it just to an R1. Keep in mind, we're asking these questions to better help us determine the noncompliance and what risk it posed. We classify under minimal, moderate, or serious. And those definitions can be found again in the NPCC 101, but for right now, you can take those categorizations at face value. The risk failure statement is what we believe to be a general risk statement regarding the potential impact of that particular violation. The questions on the left relate to the scope of the noncompliance, the inherent properties of the facilities in scope, and the duration. Last up are expectations when mitigating or remediating a FAC 8 R1 noncompliance. Firstly, was the specific deficiency in the documentation fixed? Does the remaining document adhere to the rest of the requirements or glossary terms? If you can remember a past slide or have a great memory and remember the common themes from Patrick's FAC 8 presentation from last year, you'll remember that a common theme was change management. Enforcement can't force you to put in language to ensure re-ratings are reflected in the most current facility rating methodology, so it'll be more of an informal suggestion where we'll try and help you out a little bit when it comes down to when you self-report these types of non-compliances to give you more like best practices, things to think about. So thankfully, I am giving a lot of time to everyone else. So that really concludes the enforcement expectations portion. And there's going to be a lot more to come as we work further through making our goal a reality. I'll take some questions related to enforcement, but I wanted to start off the question and answer period with things that I've already been asked from the multiple times we've done these types of presentations. So, I'll just get the ball started. I put 3 questions up there. What happens if I don't provide enforcement with all the information up front? So the enforcement SME, we have about seven people who will be reaching out to you, or one of those 7 people will be reaching out to you and ask questions in a formal request for information. They'll send you a list of, hey, I'll need to know this, I'll need to know this, and they'll upload it to the SSCQ, and then they'll generally give you a 2-week time frame to answer those questions. And then that doesn't prevent them from asking additional questions once there's some answers that they receive back. So it's an open conversation between us and you as to get the facts and circumstances completed. I couldn't copy down all the expectations fast enough. How can I find NPCC's expectations? Well, the Régie is recording this session, so it'll be posted on YouTube. You can review the recording at your leisure once it's been published. And then the last question I get a lot, interesting enough, is, what is NPCC compliance and what is the ERO? To put it plainly, NPCC compliance is the group tasked to monitor entities in the Northeast to the NERC standards. We are part of the ERO, or the Electric Reliability Organization, and the Electric Reliability Organization enterprise is comprised of NERC and the 6 regional entities. It's a highly reliable and their vision is to create a highly reliable and secure North American bulk power system. Our mission is to assure the effective and efficient reduction of risk to the reliability and the security of the grid. So with that, those are the 3 questions I usually get asked. I'm going to open up the floor to any additional questions related to anything, enforcement related, self-reporting, risk, mitigation. All right, so next year's presentation is going to be a little fun. All right.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Jason. Je vais inviter maintenant Monsieur Cécile Eli, analyste SIP principal au NPCC, pour nous présenter Introduction à l'outil de demande de pièces justificatives relatives aux normes SIP, ERT en anglais.
All right, thank you. Good morning, all. Yeah, this one's okay. Thank you, appreciate that. So again, my name is Cecil Eli. I'm a senior SIP analyst at MPCC in the compliance department. And this is going to be a basic 101 informational on the SIP evidence request tool, or ERT for short. So this is the agenda that I have for today. So we have the SIP ERT tool overview. We have the SIP ERT engagement timeline, the SIP ERT version 8.1 user guide, which I'll explain in the upcoming slides. ERT common errors, which we actually have one slide that's going to go over interactive remote access, or IRA, and intermediate systems and the difference between the two. That's a common point of confusion. Some points of just using the ERT itself, how to submit ERT and the responses, just some general recommendations on using the ERT, tips for evidence submittal and the best ways how to actually submit those. The ERT and QRSOL, which is the Quebec Reliability Standards Audit Worksheet. And finally, just a point for questions. So the SIP ERT tool overview. So what exactly is the ERT? So it's basically an elaborate Excel workbook that's used to communicate and organize the SIP compliance evidence. What does that really mean? It helps organize all of the various pieces of your SIP compliance program. So it could be BES cyber assets, BES assets, anything in terms of physical security perimeters, ESPs, electronic security perimeters, etc. And it's also used as a data exchange between the compliance team and your entity. Who develops it and actually updates it? Again, it's the ERO, which Jason explained who that is in his presentation just a moment ago. And it has it's a team of a sub-team of representatives from each region of NERC and NERC itself, which I'm actually part of that for our region. How often are these performed, meaning the new versions? Typically it's annually, but that's just a general time frame for that. How are changes proposed? There's members of the ERT team that provide and suggest improvements, and most times we use input from our own experience with using the ERT in engagements, and also some suggestions sometimes from the registered entities. And are QR saws still required? And the answer is yes. So here we have a general SIP ERT engagement timeline, and they have various levels to it. So I'll just go through these relatively quick. So the first step is a custom MPCC ERT version that's sent with the audit notification and engagement letter. So the main customization for that is that each region uses the ERT, generally the same but somewhat different. For our region, in the MPCC region, we have an MPCC tab, which we have our own customized questions, which we pose to any entity. And they're general questions that we normally would ask. So we use that for that reason, and I'll actually go into another slide later on that actually shows the MPCC tab directly. The second step is about 30 days later, the level 1 submittal is due from the entity. So one thing about that part is that the accuracy of the level 1 submittal is very important, and specifically the definition of all of your assets and anything that you populate in the ERT, mainly because those are used for sampling. And if there's any issues in the sample set itself, or if there's any issues in your BES or any assets that you populate in there, then it becomes a little bit problematic and it tends to make audits less smooth. So that's one thing I will note about that. Step 3 is the MPCC team uses the level 1 submittal to generate the sample sets, which it obviously builds off of level 1 or step 2. So then step 4 is the level 2 submittal is due 90 days after the initial notice. Step 5 is level 3 requests, which are generally sent about 2 weeks after it's 2 weeks later after the previous step, and there's usually a 2-week turnaround time, because typically with the level 3, you're getting initial questions back from the audit team or compliance team, and those generally take longer at that point in time. And then step 6 is any other level 4 and beyond requests, and those usually are about a 1-week turnaround time. So most of all the level 2 requests use sample sets previously mentioned. And typically the interview week starts either at level 3, level 4, or level 5, depending on the audit itself and how it actually goes. And we actually ask entities to just bear in mind that just to be flexible, just because we may get requests for translation, so that's sort of specific to the Canadian region. So just wanted to point that out to you as well. Okay, so we have the SIP ERT 8.1 user guide, which is the most recent ERT version that's available right now. So the user guide is pretty much a key resource in answering any questions about completing the ERT. This is typically sent with the, not typically, it's always sent with the audit notification package. In this slide, we actually included some hyperlinks, which one is the change list, which is from version 7 to version 8.1. And just so you know, 8.1 version was released on February 8th of this year, just so you're aware. And all of these resources are actually available on the NERC website, excuse me. And going forward, we have other hyperlinks and sources that we provided for your convenience. So now we'll go into some common ERT errors that we see from our experience in previous engagements. So for this first part, it pertains to Level 1 tab, the CA tab or the Cyber Assets tab, and the ESP tab, which is the Electronic Security Perimeter tab. The CA tab and the ESP tab are tabs where you're defining any type of populations of either electronic security perimeters or BES cyber assets. Excuse me. So the first common error we see is usually the first four general level 1 responses. They're usually not filled out just because the understanding's not there as to what those are. So those pertain to TFEs, technical feasibility exceptions, any type of SIP exceptional circumstances, CEC. And then we have the SRP, which really pertains to all the tools that you use to maintain and move towards compliance. And then the last one is end of life, any type of end of life assets. So you can define what you have there. If you have legacy assets, things are about to be sunsetted, etc. The next thing is on the ESP tab. A lot of times we have missing address spaces. So this really pertains to network subnets or just networks in general. Sometimes we'll get just one network listed as a general one. Typically, we need to see all networks that could be NERC SIP applicable, and that helps during our evidence review and analysis. And then the third part is the multi-line entries, which is listed in the screen capture on the right on the slide. So that really pertains to, again, just listing all the networks. And if you have multiple amounts, one tip is that you can actually go into the cell. You could hold down the Alt key and hit Enter, and you can put each line for one network in one cell. So that's just sort of a general tip that we can give for that. So next set of common errors that we see, again, populating the ERT. Sometimes this is pertaining to the CA tab and the ESP tab. A lot of times we see networks that are listed on that left-hand screenshot, which says ESP1 under the ESP ID column. They don't match when you put it in the ESP tab. So we generally want to see a correlating matching name to that. So that's another common error that we normally run into. The other common error that we run into is that we have some entities that may try to alter the format of the ERT itself, and we generally tell entities not to do that. Whenever possible. If you find something that doesn't seem to fit, when in doubt, always reach out to the audit team lead, or the ATL for short, on best how to provide that. So now the next common error that we see is the difference between intermediate systems and IRA. So the first is under the cyber asset function column of the CA tab. Here we ask that entities ensure that any asset they consider a CIP5 intermediate system have the intermediate system drop-down item selected, which is listed there in the left screen capture. So this is important for our SIP2 review. A lot of times when that's not entered properly, it tends to draw out the audit a little bit for SIP5, and it may be a little bit of back and forth on correcting those. So that's pretty important right from the beginning. And if there's an additional function that you want to enter for that asset, because sometimes, depending on the equipment and the gear itself, it may fit more than one classification, at least in the eyes of the entity. So there's another column over which has the label, if cyber asset function is other, please specify. You can select that and then fill that out appropriately. So the next is the interpretation of IRA is enabled to a CA, IRA enabled to the CA column. It's similarly, the next column over is the vendor remote access enabled to the CA. So we expect that any cyber asset accessible via an interactive remote access is from an intermediate system as per the NERC glossary of terms will be listed as true. So we're mainly concerned with devices that are inside an ESP. So generally those would be classified as a BES cyber asset or BCA or a PCA, which is a protected cyber asset. So I think the general rule of thumb is that to remember is to have anything that's a intermediate system, that's generally outside of the ESP, and anything that's that's capable of IRA should be inside the ESP, and that's usually a point of confusion when interpreting like what cyber asset has IRA versus not, and versus an intermediate system. So the cyber asset inside the ESP is normally the target, and the intermediate, that's the target, and the intermediate system is the source. So that's another way you can look at it for interpreting IRA versus an intermediate system. And this is probably more important for the SIP5 SMEs within your entity. So it's particularly important for that because, again, if these are defined incorrectly, then the sampling process is offset and then it becomes an issue. So just be cognizant of that. Next. So using the ERT, as you can see in the arrows and in the bullet points on the side, you could have approximately 100 requests depending on the scope of the audit. Hopefully that doesn't intimidate or scare anyone, but that's just the reality of it. So the initial evidence requests, those are also requested in the QR SAW. And generally those lighter green parts, which I will just highlight really quick here. Those light green parts typically pertain to documentation focused on policies, programs, processes, diagrams, configurations, etc. And then the darker green ones, or just the different shade of green, which I'll point out here, here, and here, those pertain to the actual populations for the sample sets. So that just bear that in mind. So we'll go on to using the ERT. So this is what the sampling of the population tabs looks like up here in the red box. So there's 13 possible sampling populations depending on the audit scope. We just stress that every population tab that's part of the audit scope should be filled out. And because sometimes we do see some populations are actually not filled out. So that just delays the audit, which nobody wants if that happens. If there's any population or standards that are not in scope, you can just simply state not in scope. So we get that question a lot as well. And the user guide, again, has instructions on how to complete that tab or tabs in each column of the ERT. Just pay attention to any of the drop downs because there's various pieces of the ERT that have that are pre-populated. And again, we ask not to modify that, the format of the ERT. It will cause confusion with the audit teams that are looking at it. Also pick the lists and date of the activation and deactivation of any cyber assets. And always contact your audit team lead if there's any questions or confusion. Okay. So next is the MPCC tab itself, which I had mentioned earlier. So this is mainly used to ask questions or requests for information, or RFIs as we call them, by the audit team. So this is the main data exchange tab where we go back and forth, where there's an auditor request, which is shown right here, questions 1 through 20. There's a level number, which is 2 in this example. There's an RFI number, which actually defines the RFI or assigns it a number so we can reference it, the standard, the requirement. And we also ask we're focused on internal controls these days. So there's a column that actually has an X showing that as well. So that's just more so for referencing purposes. And then the entity will respond here along with the documents that are referenced to support the response. So just that's just an example of what may be in that. And there's sometimes we use those questions for follow-up questions, like if you're in an interview and so forth. So the next tab is about sample sets themselves. So it's a high-level example, just displaying what it looks like. And so you can see in column L, where you have one asset with IRA is enabled as true. Show that there under column L. Go to the next. So here on the sample sets tab, that's SS-005-R2-L2-01. Is used in the 3 noted requests, and the source of the set is from the CA tab for cyber assets with true in the IRA column. Then you can see below the first asset was selected as part of the sample set with the X, which is here. And that's what these yellow or orange columns, depending on your eyesight, means. That's the sample that you're actually picking from the population. And just note that the samples provided, performed in alignment with the ERO sampling handbook, which we actually provided some links at the bottom to that and sources at the slide. And those are hyperlinks, so you can click on those when I believe the presentations are going to be provided for this. So if you notice in this slide, this is on the CA tab for SIP5 R2 or SIP5-7 R2. If you notice in column D of the screen capture, the request IDs for SIP5 R2 L201 and R2 L203 apply to the cyber assets selected in that sample set from the previous slide. So that was just more of how the sample sets are created by the audit team. So now there's one other piece of the sample set, which is about dates. So there's certain samples such as logs, anything that's date specific. We have another date sample set as well. So we'll ask provide us logs from within the audit period, date X, Y, and Z, or a range of dates. That's what that those dates actually apply to. So just so you're aware of that. So the next thing is just more of the naming convention of all of these are ERT requests and responses. So if you notice, that's sort of the nomenclature that we use for the ERT request IDs. So these three S's here, they designate the SIP reliability standard numbers. So it could be SIP2, well, no, not really SIP2. They don't have sample sets. SIP3, SIP5, SIP7, et cetera. The R, which is the small r here, would be the requirement number within the standard itself. So it'd be like R1, R2, et cetera. The small m here is the level of evidence. So it could be either the level 1 submittal, level 2 round, level 3, et cetera. And then the small n's at the bottom are the two-digit number within the requirement standard or level. So in terms of submitting the ERT and the responses, this is just the folder structure that we would like to see. Just create folders with names matching the request ID for each of the requests in the MPCC tab, and to create a folder with each RFI number. So this really helps the audit team in terms of finding wherever the actual supporting evidence is. And it reduces more RFIs in case they can't find something. That went far. Yeah, okay. So next is just general recommendations. So again, be sure to check the accuracy of the assets in the ERT. Again, it's important for sampling sets. We ask that you provide narratives with evidence artifacts. That's mainly because, you may present an artifact and the audit team or the compliance team may not be able to discern what it is you're actually talking about. So the narratives really help with any of the evidence artifacts that you submit. Again, use the naming conventions as per the user guide, and review the folder structure of the evidence submittals. And one recommendation we actually give for entities is to have sort of a peer review. It could be someone that's not as familiar or is an SME within your entity. So that way they'll question it if they don't understand it, which will probably be the same mode of reasoning for the audit team as well. And they have a bit more knowledge than others when it comes to something like that. So we just suggest internally do some type of a mock review, peer review, or mock audit. So one other thing with the ERT itself, it does help preparation for future audits because these are ongoing engagements. So it behooves whoever the entity is to actually fill this out correctly, and it'll help your compliance program, we think, internally overall. And one thing we do see sometimes is entities may take the ERT and use it as a living document for their own use. So we're not endorsing it one way versus the other, but that's one thing we have seen some entities do, especially some of the larger ones. So that's something you can, that's another take back that you can have with that. So we have some other tips for evidence. Again, submit supporting documents with brief explanations of evidence files. For screenshot evidence, annotate wherever possible. If you can include the cyber asset and identifier, that actually helps. And the date and time of when you actually captured that particular screenshot evidence. So it's not stale data. We know that it's actually applicable during the audit period. The other thing is any photographic evidence, again, annotate if possible. If you're talking about devices, we typically ask for front and back pictures of that device. Sometimes in the server rack, there's many devices that look exactly the same, so that's another reason why you may do that. And again, include the cyber asset name and identification tag. Just some notes about the ERT and the QR SAW, accurately populated ERT responses and QR SAWs must be submitted, like we mentioned earlier. Cite ERT responses in the QR SAW if the same evidence is being used to demonstrate compliance. And just remember that any additional evidence may be required to support the QR SAW responses. So, in summary, if at any point you're not really sure what request is looking for, it seems like something's, too ambiguous or not clear, don't hesitate to reach out to the audit team lead or the audit team to ask any questions. We realize there's a learning curve with using the ERT, especially for the first time, and it can be a little intimidating, but as you get used to it, it gets easier to work with. I promise that. Maybe I shouldn't promise that. And so this is a wealth of information to provide. So I'll pause here in case there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Est-ce qu'on a des questions dans la salle?
Hi, Hugo Sansouci from Hydro Quebec. You mentioned that the ERT is used for audits. Can it also be used for certification by certification teams for a certification of an entity or a new certification?
Interesting question. I don't see why not, but those engagements are a bit different. So, I mean, if you maintain it internally, that's fine. But those are more of a forward-looking type of exercise where you're designing a new EMS system, something to that nature. So you may show it to us, but it's not like an audit engagement where you're sampling and things like that.
Est-ce qu'on a des questions en Zoom? Me, I have maybe one or two questions.
Sure.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Let's say I'm an entity that's been, it has to be audited for the first time, SIP audit. And you look at the ERT and sometimes it's a lot of information and don't know where to start with.
Even when an auditor works with it.
Yes, exactly. So I'm for the first time audited during a SIP audit. How is the audit team, how is the audit team, how would like the entity, the audit team to provide a one-on-one informational session to the audited entity. So let's say you say contact the audit team lead. Mm-hmm. But let's say we want to move forward, okay, and to have a discussion. Let's say, does the audit team is willing to provide a one-on-one informational session to the audited entity? Is it something that's done during these audits?
I think those are probably more outside of the scope of an audit. I mean, that would probably have to be an outreach or something like that. Or just like this, where we're talking about, are you talking about a more in-depth type of interaction? Okay. I mean, we can give certain instructions if you're unsure of how to populate a column or work with the worksheet itself. I mean, that would be a separate conversation, but as far as like a full-blown, it sounds like a tutorial, if that's what you're talking about.
Yes, it's...
I would probably have to take that back and get you the answer for something like that. It sounds like it's more than just like one or two areas of the ERT that you're probably referring to, like a first-timer.
Yes, exactly. So, no, it's okay. So
Yeah.
contact the
No.
audit team lead. That's the first thing.
Yeah, no, definitely that.
That's. And you know what? Usually you customize this ERT. The last question, for example, on
Sure.
slide 11, okay, there were all these, standards. Do you, for example, let's
Okay.
say, for an audit scope in which is included one or two, I don't know, SIP reliability standards, do you show in this tab only the reliability standards that are in the audit scope here?
Oh, I think I understand what you mean. Typically, it will show all of those, and we get this question a lot. I think I know what you're going to ask, and that's where you would say, like, where's my pointer? Like if it was SIP2, for example, if it's not in scope, we would just put not in scope or something to that effect.
So the entity has to write not in scope at this moment. So
Correct.
you add all, okay. Good.
Yeah, we haven't automated that part or done
Okay.
anything. We send a general, the general MPCC tab with the entire ERT. It's embedded within it with all the other tabs.
Good. No,
So-
thank you very much for your answers. It's good to know because sometimes when you see the whole list is burdensome but again,
It's
an
large,
automatic-
I know. That's why I had that disclaimer at the end of the presentation.
Good. No, thank you very much. We
remote?
still have, so you see.
No problem.
We talked.
I figured there'd be a few.
I leave my colleague.
Sure.
I have a question from an online participant. So is there a reduced version for low-impact entities? A reduced version.
There is not currently. There's one tab on the ERT that has low, and that's optional for now, at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we are done with the questions. No more questions in the room. Thank you very much for your
No problem.
presentation.
You're welcome.
Good. So, moi, je pense qu'on peut commencer, d'accord? Madame Jacqueline Jiménez, directrice conformité du NPCC, aimerait rajouter un peu plus d'informations concernant la dernière question qu'on avait, l'avant-dernière question qu'on avait posée à Monsieur Cécile Hiray. How willing is the audit team to provide a 101 training session or informational session on ERT?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add some additional information to that. Yes, we don't do an official one-on-one with the entity for an ERT, but we definitely are there for the entity if they have questions, especially if it's the first time that they're using the ERT. So working with the audit team lead, they'll answer any questions you have. But as Cecil had mentioned in his presentation, we do provide the ERT user guide that is a NERC resource, and that's a very important place to start as you're working through the ERT. It's a fairly large document. I think it's about 80 pages in length, but it goes through in detail explaining the tabs and the information that needs to be put in there. So that's a great place to start if it's the first time that you're using the ERT. But MPCC is definitely there to assist you throughout the process as you're working through the using the ERT. And as Cecil had mentioned, the first input into the ERT for that level 1 information is extremely important. So if there are any questions throughout the process, please reach out to the ATL so that that population set is as accurate as possible, because if it's not, then there's a lot of back and forth between the entity and the audit team to ensure that we have the correct information to do the level 2 sample sets, and that can delay the process and give you less time to provide that level 2 information that we're asking for, and that the due date for that is typically with the QR saws and the evidence submittal. You're welcome.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Jiménez. Maintenant, on passe à la prochaine présentation. J'invite Monsieur Daniel Kidney, ingénieur principal à la conformité au NPCC, pour nous donner un aperçu de la norme PRC 027.1, coordination du fonctionnement des systèmes de protection pendant les défauts.
Okay, thank you, Laurentia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Kidney. I'm a senior compliance engineer with MPCC. I'm mainly on audit teams as an auditor. Today I'm here to give an overview of the PRC 27-1 standard, which is a coordination of protection systems for performance during faults. I'll be going through the requirements 1, 2, and 3, kind of going over the language of those requirements, talking about what the audit team generally looks for when we're auditing the standard, as well as giving some examples of findings we've had in auditing U.S. entities on this standard. So PRC 27-1, purpose of this standard is to maintain coordination of protection systems installed to detect and isolate faults on RTP elements. This is BES elements in the United States, such that these protection systems operate in the intended sequence during faults. So the effective dates for the standard, it's been in effect in the United States since April 1st, 2021. And in Quebec, just recently went into effect 2 days ago, October 1st, 2024. In terms of applicability, the standard is applicable to transmission owners, generator owners, and distribution providers. A couple notes on this. There's no Quebec-specific differences to the standard, except that all references to the terms bulk electric system or BES in the standard are replaced with the terms main transmission system or RTP, respectively. And then, in addition, in terms of the applicability, the standard only applies to protection systems installed to detect and isolate faults on RTP elements. So in the case of generator owners and distribution providers, it's only applicable to those entities who own such protection systems that are protecting RTP elements. So starting with requirement 1 of PRC 27, it reads entities must establish a process for developing new and revised protection system settings for RTP elements such that the protection systems operate in the intended sequence during faults. And then there's 3 sub-requirements as well. R1.1 is a review and update of short-circuit model data for the RTP elements under review. Requirement 1.2 is a review of the developed protection system settings. And then R1.3 has additional sub-requirements there as well, but it's essentially a coordination of proposed and revised protection system settings with electrically joined, for electrically joined facilities with the other owners. So starting with R1.1, which is the review and update of short-circuit model data for the RTP elements under review. The goal is to have an accurate short-circuit model so that it reflects the physical power system accurately, because this is used as the basis for protective device coordination studies. In terms of the model data, we see entities using software such as CAPE and Aspen One-Liner to develop their short-circuit models. But what constitutes a review and update of short-circuit model data under requirement 1.1? The reviews could include a review of applicable RTP line, transformer, and generator impedances and fault currents. You want to have accurate data for those to ensure that your model accurately reflects the system performance. Additionally, you want to review the network model to confirm that the network accurately reflects the configuration of the actual system. Make sure that all the topology is accurately reflected in your model. And additionally, you want to review, if applicable, not always applicable, but if there's any interconnected transmission owners, generator owners, or distribution providers with your system, you want to review the information for those interconnected entities as well. So our 1.2 then requires that the process has a review of the developed protection system settings. This is important because it reduces the possibility of introducing human error into the process. Some examples of what could constitute a review of the settings could be peer reviews internally. Some automated checking programs we've seen to review short circuit models to ensure accuracy, as well as any entity developed review procedures. Documentation for which of the types of reviews are performed, as well as completion of the review, including verification that the newly developed settings are correct, should be maintained for all new and revised protection system settings. This is something that the audit team will request in the course of an audit to review to make sure that compliance is met with PRC 27. And then finally, under our 1.3 is coordination with neighboring entities. A little confusing here because coordination is used in two separate meanings in this case, in this standard. Protection system coordination studies, it's kind of the studies you perform to make sure your protection systems settings are correct or performing accurately, but the coordination in this context is meant to make sure that entities are communicating with their neighboring owners with whom they share electrically joined facilities. For example, in the case of a transmission line, if that particular transmission line is a tie line between two different entities, it's not only important that the settings are coordinated, but that the entities themselves communicate with each other and are coordinated with each other. This is essential so that any potential protection system coordination issues can be identified and addressed prior to the implementation of any changes. So we have 4 examples of that type of coordination in this case. If you yourself are developing new or revised settings, you issue those settings to another entity for their review, how it might impact their system. Likewise, if a connecting entity sends you newly developed settings for their system, you want to review those and any impact they might have on your system. You want to resolve any potential issues that may arise in these new settings prior to their implementation in the field. And then finally, you want to communicate with your neighboring entities for any unforeseen circumstances as a result of any protection system component failures. So with that summary of R1, the audit approach that the MPCC audit team takes when reviewing R1 for entities, basically we just take your process document, review it, make sure that all of the 3 parts listed there on the right, R1.1, R1.2, and R1.3, are covered in the process document. Now this should say R3 audit approach at the top, but while requirement 1 covers having a process for developing new and revised settings, requirement 3 is actually using that process when new and revised settings are developed. Any evidence to show compliance with R3 must be maintained for all new and revised protection system settings that are developed, and the evidence must show that each of the 3 parts listed under R1 are met for each case of new settings. So then with R3, the audit approach, while we're looking at the process document under R1, the audit team under R3 will look for a list of all new and revised protection system settings that were developed during the audit period. Depending on the size of the initial list of settings changes, the audit team will generally create a sample set of those settings developed. And then from that sample set, we will generally request evidence showing that each of the three parts of the process in R1 were met when those settings were developed. So like I said, PRC 27 has been in effect in the US since 2021. We've been auditing requirements 1 and 3 for a few years now. So we have issued findings and recommendations to the entities that we've audited. I'll quickly go over some examples of recommendations, areas of concerns, and potential non-compliances that we've issued so far for PRC 27, just to give everyone an idea of what kind of issues we've been seeing so far. As a reminder, areas of concern are items that the audit team believes could lead to future non-compliance if not addressed. They can also be items that have been identified to pose some sort of risk to the RTP as well. Potential non-compliances are situations where the audit team finds that an entity may not have met the requirements of the standard. And then finally, recommendations are suggestions from the audit team that can help an entity improve its existing process. So to start, under requirement 1, which again is the process document, some areas of concern that we've issued to entities in the US. Entity didn't have the entity's process documentation did not explicitly mention the requirement parts R1.1 through R1.3. And then the next area of concern is that the entity's process maps and flowcharts, which they included in their process document, did not clearly illustrate how all of the parts of requirement 1 were followed. Then moving on to requirement 3, which again, requirement 1 is having the process, requirement 3 is following that process. We have issued some potential non-compliances for requirement 3 in the US. There's 2 examples here on the screen. First is that the entity failed to provide data documentation demonstrating that they performed the review of developed protection system settings. This is under requirement 1.2. And then the second example of a potential non-compliance we've seen, the entity failed to provide evidence of documentation that the communications between themselves and an interconnected entity was performed as part of their process under R1. And then finally, some recommendations under R3. There's 2 here that we've made to entities. First is to utilize dated checklists or change management tickets to ensure that all required procedural steps are completed and that proper evidence is stored. Just kind of makes things simpler for your entity to demonstrate that you have been performing the process under PRC 27. And then second, to retain all communications with other owners of electrically joined facilities in relay settings folders, just to have it easier accessible by staff and for compliance documentation. It's good for everyone to be able to access that, and it also makes, when we come to audit you, you have everything ready to go just to send over to us to demonstrate compliance. So finally, we'll move on to R2. We did R1 and 3 together as they kind of go hand in hand, but R2 is its own separate instance. So over time, incremental changes in fault current can accumulate enough to impact the coordination of protection system functions. So to minimize this risk, R2 requires entities to periodically perform protection system coordination studies and/or review available fault currents for those protection system functions listed in attachment A. So under R2, there's 3 options for how you can meet compliance with this standard. The first option is to perform a protection system coordination study in a time interval not to exceed 6 calendar years. This kind of gives you just a straightforward time-based methodologies for review settings, eliminates the need to establish a full current baseline and periodically perform comparisons. Kind of gives you a flexibility of each 6-year interval to perform a protection system coordination study. Second option is a little wordier there, but basically it boils down to having a baseline for your full current values, and then every 6 years performing a comparison of your current values against that baseline. Depending on how the comparison performs, if there's a 15% or greater difference, then at that point, you'll have to perform a protection system coordination study. But in cases where it's under 15%, you're good with just a comparison every 6 years. You'll only have to perform the full coordination study in cases where the difference is 15% or greater. And then finally, option 3 is a combination of these first two options. It can be used for various scenarios. If the fall current baseline was not established prior to the effective date of the standard, an entity should perform the full coordination study under option 1 within the first 6-year interval, and can then at that point choose to compare fall current values as described in option 2 in subsequent 6-year intervals, or continued performing full coordination studies under 6-year intervals. The end. All right, so I'll go, this is R2 applicability, the relay functions that it's applicable to. This is straight out of the standard. Sorry, moved on mine. These 4 functions are applicable to R2. They're applicable in these 2 cases listed on the right. Again, straight out of the standard, attachment A. And finally, just have examples of each of the 3 options. This is option 1. You see we have the standard effective date listed, as well as the end of the first 6 calendar years from the standard effective date. Under option 1, you want to perform a full coordination study in that first 6-year interval, and then your next coordination study should be performed in the 6-year interval from the date of the first coordination study. Option 2, which is the one if you exceed 15% or more in fall current values, you need to perform a full coordination study. First example here is if the deviation is less than 15%, you have your baseline established prior to the effective date of the standard. You perform the comparison in that first 6-year interval from October 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2030, in this case, May 31st, 2027. With no deviation of 15% or more, there's no further steps at that point. Your next step is in that next 6-year interval from May 31st, 2027 to again compare the values and perform a coordination study if necessary. And then the bottom one here is if the deviation is 15% or more, you'll see the comparison was performed on June 23rd, 2030. You have to perform the coordination study that resulting from that deviation still within that 6-year interval from the standard effective date. So the first 6 calendar year interval ends December 31st, 2030. You'll have to have the coordination study resulting from the deviation of 15% or more performed by that date. And then finally, option 3, which was the combination. If the baseline isn't established prior to the effective date of the standard, you perform a standard coordination study in that 6-year interval. In this case, it was performed May 31st, 2027. At that point, the baseline is established, and subsequent 6-year intervals, you can choose to either compare the fall current values against that baseline and perform coordination studies if the deviation is 15% or more, or you can just choose to continue performing full coordination studies. It's up to the entity at that point. So I kind of rushed through those last slides. I got the 5-minute. They started playing the music to play me off. So there may be questions on those. We do provide our email address here. This basically overall compliance monitoring group gets any emails from here. So if you have any questions about PRC 27, send it to that email address. We have many eyes looking at it. We'll be able to get an answer to you as soon as possible. But thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
Merci beaucoup. Questions? Questions de la salle? Pour le moment, aucune. No, from the room. Est-ce qu'on a des questions sur Zoom? Bon. Une question, one question.
No problem. Let's see what I could do.
We have.
So I have one Zoom question. It's in French, so I'm going to try to translate it at the same time. For the baseline before October 2024, can you correspond it to the data during the mise en service, during the entry into operation?
So you're saying a new facility, you would be using their initial data as the baseline. I would say yes. I don't want to speak broadly for NPCC. I think that would be acceptable. You have those initial baseline values from the installation of the facility that could be used as the baseline.
Okay.
What we can do, for example, we will send the question to NPCC auditors, and then we will provide the answer, a detailed answer on the internet.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
go ahead with the second.
I have a second question. So this one is also in French. Could you provide an example of a coordination study for a network of 161 kilovolts or more?
Could I provide like the document or?
It says an example of a coordination study. I don't know if it applies.
I'm not exactly sure what they'd be looking for, but I mean, you're going to want to review all your protective system settings, ensure the values are set properly to cover the fault current that they need to. I don't know if they are looking for a full document or what in that case, but.
Okay. That's all.
Good. So,
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. On continue. Je vais inviter Matthew Forrest, ingénieur principal à l'évaluation des risques des entités du NPCC. Il va nous présenter pour la norme EEP 011-2, les exigences E7 et E8, les plans de préparation aux conditions de temps froid.
Thank you. She mentioned I'm Matthew Forrest from NPCC. My primary background prior to NPCC was mostly generator operator with some compliance management portions as well, but mostly nuclear power plant, renewables, things like that. So I do have a little bit of inside the fence experience. I know Hydro-Quebec, based on its name, is hydro, and that's pretty robust already, but I'm going to go over mostly R7 and R8 on the EOP 11 TAC 2 standard, and I will hit some of the other standards that are applicable with this as well. Over the years, there have been a number of events that have severely impacted the bulk electric system. Many of them, some of them have listed, many more of them than are listed here. The North American ice storm back in 1998, I'm sure many people remember that. That wasn't something that necessarily was in the geo realm of control because it was a lot of ice and transmission damage. But those kind of events can impact generator operators as well. A lot of people think, oh, the Northeast is pretty inherently ready for cold weather. But clearly, we've had our share of events, going back way prior to 1989. These events set wintertime peak demand, which is already an HQ item for winter. That's your peak reliability time, peak demand time. These are causing massive generation forced outages, which limit capacity reserve. Transmission, generation, fuel supply, and access for repair or return to service are all affected during these events. And as we can see with the short list provided, cold weather, associated winds, and precipitation are concerns for everyone in all regions. This list is just a little bit of a cross-reference to the types of items that can impact the plants. Gas supply, electricity demands, again, not necessarily in the GO's realm of control, but understanding where your fuel supply is coming from and how to cope with reduced fuel supply and letting the TOPs and the balancing authorities and RCs know what your limitations are is going to be a critical aspect of dealing with winter conditions. The Texas cold weather event in February 2021 caused a combination of outages, derates, and failures with 4,124 generating units lost service. 34,000 megawatts of generation weren't available for 2 consecutive days. And as I mentioned, although Hydro-Quebec has limited thermal power, which I believe is around 1,200 megawatts, that 1,200 megawatts can be critical to grid reliability, and the lessons learned from all the NERC events that we've had in the previous years in the States can be pretty valuable to Hydro-Quebec. In July of 2019, FERC and NERC staff released a joint report for the South Central United States cold weather bulk electric system event that occurred in 2018. The recommendations in the report include that each generator owner or operator develops and implements cold weather preparedness plans, procedures, and awareness training based on factors such as geographical location, plant configurations. They can include the need for accurate cold weather temperature design specifications and applications, operating limitations. So that could be anything from inability to run, inability to restart, delayed start, that type of thing, that are provided to the RC and the BA and the TOP. Entities need to implement freeze protection measures and perform periodic maintenance and inspection on freeze protection measures. So those measures could be anything from wind blocks, insulation, heat trace, or they could be procedural, such as starting up early, or for a wind plant that may have potential blade icing if they're operating delayed operation during the precipitation event and then starting up during the end of the precipitation event when cold weather is still ongoing, if they're capable. As I said, they can be physical or they can be procedural. Hydro-Quebec, again, has many river management plans that are in place and probably can be utilized as measures to help maintain reliability of the hydro plants, such as the ice formation, trash rack observations, things like that, all part of the river management system. So I think you're going to be pretty good there, but it's all good stuff to look at. Most of the focus of my presentation, as I said, will be the GOP planning, but I'll touch on IRO 10 TAC 4 and TOP 3 TAC 5. The reliability standard revisions proposed by the project were proposed to help enhance reliability of the bulk electric system during cold weather and mitigate the possibility for generating unit unavailability due to lack of preparation for cold weather periods. It is expected by providing the increased visibility of cold weather-related data to the reliability coordinators, balancing authorities, and transmission operators, and by requiring baseline levels of cold weather, the planning and preparation by generator owners, the reliability will increase. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these, but like I said, if you know your plant availability, that's something you need to be knowledgeable about at all times. So if it's weather dependent, the update to the RC and the BA and whatnot, the TOP need to be happening that day. It's not just a one-time notification of, oh, this is what our plant can do. Should be aware of what is going on at all times. The list I have here is consistent with the cold weather data from the GOP, EOP 11 TAC 2, R7.3 of the standard. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but again, capability and availability, fuel supply issues, switching capabilities, and environmental constraints are key items that the BAs need to be understand about. And then generating unit minimum. So when the GOs come up with their generating unit minimum temperature, it's the same criteria as I have listed here, and it's one of those three. And then for TOP3, it's just added cold weather information is the same information as IRO 10 R1 for the reliability coordination RC, but R1 for transmission operators and R2 for balancing authority as part of TOP3. Plans and training are generating unit specific, so if there were 3 units on a site, you'd have a plan for each unit. If there were 3 generators in one building that are all identical, you could have a plan for that one unit that has 3 generators in it, but there are plants and sites that have various items on them. They might have wind, they might have solar, they might have 2 different kinds of generators, that type of thing. I don't want to beat that into the ground because I want to be cognizant of our time here. But if anybody has any questions on that, at the end we can go over them. As a minimum, per section per R7.2 of the EOP 11 TAC 2, generating unit cold weather data shall be provided to the RCs, BAs, and TOPs, and this is the same criteria that I just listed in those other 2 standards. Each GO needs to implement and maintain 1 or more cold weather preparedness plans, and that should factor in precipitation as well. If you have filters or screens or things like that. Something as simple as a cabinet in a substation, if the seal around that cabinet is poor and water is getting in or precipitation is getting in and freezing, it can hamper the operation of the components associated with that. I have personal experience where we had a motor operated disconnect. We couldn't operate because the seal on a cabinet was bad, and we opened it up and it was a block of ice inside. So nothing was going to move that linkage. All those items should be part of the annual maintenance program, and all should be cognizant of the operators and engineers and maintenance personnel at the plant. All year round, really, right? So it's easy to get complacent, but all year round thinking about what things should look like and what you're going to do to prepare for the winter is important. R8 is the training. Each generator owner, in conjunction with its generator operator, shall identify the entity responsible for providing the generating unit specific training. And that identified entity shall provide the training to its maintenance and operations personnel responsible. So this does not mean that someone's coming in to do insulation or heat trace work or snow clearing. They don't need that training. They just need a brief on the components they're going to be around, that type of thing. An insulator might need a briefing because he's performing insulation near a critical component, and you want to make sure that component is operating correctly afterwards. But other than that, slower. Sorry, I go into a stream of consciousness and I just rip through this. If there's anything anybody wants me to repeat from what I've already done, I will do so gladly. There are a number of items on the NERC website. The ERO CME practice guide on cold weather is a great one. It's got a lot of questions and ideas. But like anything, each one of the items that are in that practice guide can be extrapolated out to multiple levels. So it's not just a single question. You really have to think about knowing your plant, knowing what's going on, and being able to take the questions that are in that practice guide and apply them to figuring out how each entity is going to create a cold weather plan or create training and understand what components they need to look at. The implementation project plan, again, is another good one. For example, for R7, the GO needs to be able to provide documentation to show that it has a preparedness plan and it was developed for Hydro-Quebec prior to 10/1/24. For R7.2, the GO needs to be able to provide documentation to show that the annual inspection and maintenance of generating unit freeze protection measures took place prior to 10/1/24. For R8, which is the training item, the GO and GOP need to be able to provide documentation to show that the training for maintenance and operations personnel was completed again prior to 10/1/24. Verify your completion of the initial performance of the GOP requirements, the operating plans, the implementation, and the training plan. Still going too fast. And be aware of upcoming standards changes. So I provided a few best practices based on my experience, based on seeing what other plants do. Understand the basis for generator operating limitations day to day. And that goes to the point I was making of if your plant is going to need 9 hours to start up because you need to provide pre-warming of equipment or additional snow removal or anything like that, or switching that needs to happen that you need manpower in, that needs to be available to your BAs, TOPs, and RCs every day. Take advantage of affiliates in industry forums. There's the North American Generator Forum, North American Transmission Forum. Clearly, Hydro-Quebec has a number of entities that are affiliated with each other that have their own best practices. I would say get together and talk about what each one is doing with that. Protective measures and efforts should be prioritized based on equipment that has the potential to cause a unit trip or partial outage, impact startup, or plant monitoring and automation. And to me, this is a key one for training. Knowing that you have equipment that can cause a plant trip and understanding what it does so that maybe it can be mitigated is a key aspect. So if there's an instrument that might be freezing, if a control room operator can do something to take manual control of that equipment so that the automation doesn't take the plant out, you can keep the plant online while you mitigate the issue that's causing the freezing. Make sure you understand the adversity impact of the environment, understand anything that can cause fuel disruption, and anything that can reduce plant safety. Again, the approach is not going to be the same for everybody. Thermal, wind, solar, hydro, all going to have different approaches. All have to take things associated with these standards a little differently. Better. Some more suggested best practices. As I said, don't be complacent. Think about cold weather, even in May, June, July. Split up the winter preparation. Looking at coming out of the winter, that's a good time to write down any winter issues that you may have had, come up with corrective action plans or condition reporting that you're going to utilize to figure out another solution. The plans, the training always can be updated any time of the year. It's not a one and done. There's no fault for figuring out new things that you want to do. It's a recommendation. And again, this is to promote reliability. This is a very, I guess, internal controls heavy standard, right? So procedures and processes and training are going to be key here. Know and check single failure equipment. Understand the plant trip criteria associated with that. Get your system engineers and maintenance personnel to help operators out looking at vulnerable areas, even to increase monitoring when it is cold out and increase monitoring of vulnerable areas. Verify building penetrations, close and seal properly. Look out for damaged or missing insulation or equipment. Utilize equipment such as infrared guns or remote temperature indicators that the operators can use to look at vulnerable areas and understand if there's trends towards freezing or severe cooling. And then maintain a list of deficiencies that require additional contingencies, such as a failed steam trap or an air receiver that requires frequent blowdown, so the air receiver might have humidity in it or condensation that could freeze, and that could freeze other plant equipment down the road. So it's not always, I heard you, it's not always directly related to a trip. This is just some more general plant awareness items. I've probably mentioned a lot of these already. And then my last slide is a lot of references that are available, some really great key references that are here. The reliability guideline and generating unit winter readiness, version 4 just came out, is a great document. And that's all I have for the presentation. If there's any questions, let me know. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. So, est-ce qu'on a des questions dans la salle? Do we have questions not in the Zoom? Okay, so I have one question. Sorry, you mentioned North American Generator Forum, North American Transmission Forum. We can, as a registered entity, my question is, may we attend freely without being a member? These webinars, where do we get this information?
I will have to get back to you on that because I am actually not a member of those forums either. I know they exist. But if you want to reach out to me, I can reach out to some of our generator operators that I have dealt with, and we can get you that information.
Good. Okay, we will post this information after the seminar. Thank you. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
And I do want to say, so Northeast Power Coordinating Council I've been doing cold weather outreach to generators for the last couple of years. I know it's a little bit of a haul coming up to Quebec, but if any of the entities want to reach out and even have a virtual conversation on cold weather preparedness and whatnot, we're more than welcome to do that. It's an outreach. It's not an assessment or a certification or an audit or anything. It's really just trying to help get reliability up. So.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Je vais inviter maintenant Monsieur Jess Scythe gestionnaire de programme GridEx, Electricity Information Sharing and Analysis Center, ou ISAC. Il va nous présenter GridEx VIII pour 2025.
All right, thank you, Laurentia, and hello, my name is Jesse Seith. I'm the GridEx Program Manager for the EISAC, as was mentioned. Thank you so much for having me today and giving me an excuse to finally visit the city of Montreal. It is my first time visiting, and so far just loving it. It's a very beautiful city. A little bit about my background, very briefly. I am a former transmission operator, actually in the NPCC region. I was in the Eversource Transmission Operations Center in Connecticut. And so kind of coming from that operations background and then running a few GridExes for them, I eventually came to the EISAC a couple years ago and ran GridEx VII. Now we're looking towards GridEx VIII coming up in 2025. And I just want to do a quick level set for those of you who may have less familiarity with GridEx as a program. It is a large-scale distributed play exercise focused on grid security. It is the largest grid security exercise in North America. It includes Mexico, Canada, and the United States. It is largely focused on electricity utilities, but we also bring in cross-sector partners across gas, communications, water and wastewater. We bring in government partners, state, provincial, local governments, and we have federal law enforcement, local law enforcement also participating. It is a very large exercise. I'll give you a little bit of an idea of how we pull all that together. But what I'd like to do today is talk about two things. First, GridEx VII, which happened last year, 2023, and talk about what progress has been made in pursuing the recommendations from that exercise. And then we'll talk about GridEx VIII coming up in 2025 and what we're doing to enhance that exercise and continue to make it better as we also try and make the system better, more resilient, and more reliable. So to review first the GridEx VII exercise, by all accounts, a successful exercise. We had 252 different organizations participate across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. This included all 17 reliability coordinators. That included Hydro-Quebec. That included the regions, including NPCC participating. And we had 15,000 plus individual players engaged. That is more than we have had ever before. And what we really saw with this exercise was those organizations participating are continuing year over year, or every other year, as we do this every 2 years, to expand their exercise, to add more complexity, to bring in more internal partners, to add more external partners, and to really reap the benefits of coordinating with all of those people during a crisis simulation so that we don't have to learn it when the real thing happens. The primary focus, of course, is to get from these exercises lessons learned, action items, things that we can carry forward in order to make actual measurable improvements to our security posture, to our resilience, to our reliability. Now, we do specifically focus on that response to a coordinated cyber and physical attack on critical infrastructure. We do bring in some weather impacts or other natural disasters at times, but the main focus is that response to an attack, which is something that requires a little bit of a different response than simply something that came from Mother Nature. So I'd like to highlight first just a few of the things that came out of this distributed play exercise that takes place over 2 days. I won't run through all of these. These are actually spelled out in great detail on our public lessons learned report, which you can find on the EISAC and NERC website. But the main focuses for this were on really seeing how much value participating entities got out of certain aspects of this exercise. Engagement with government partners was huge. When we sought our feedback and our input from our participants after the exercise, one of the very common highlights was when they engaged with their government partners in response to these attacks, they learned a very large amount about perhaps some assumptions that were being made, both by governments and by the utilities. And those were able to be dispelled and corrected, and plans and processes were able to be updated to ensure that if the real thing were to ever happen, those would be addressed. Similarly, a lot of participants learned a lot about responding in these new environments we find ourselves in. Hybrid or remote formats, recognizing that while we absolutely can respond to crises in these formats, they are still new. We are not operating the same way today as we were in 2021 for GridEx VI, and we certainly aren't operating in the same way today as we were in 2019 for GridEx V. So that's going to continue to be an emphasis of the exercise process to ensure that we are coming to it from where we are now and then learning how to respond in these environments. Communication, of course, was a big one as well that was highlighted, and the various ways that that can be refined. And then we also had a couple recommendations for ourselves, how we can become better with the exercise. One was to ensure that we are supporting planning teams of all size and all levels of experience. More on that to follow when I talk enhancements about GridEx VIII. But also to enhance the cyber and technical components and kind of bring that into balance with our physical security injects that we had. GridEx VII and the scenario is very much focused on physical security. You may recall that late 2022, early 2023, there were some fairly high-profile physical attacks on substations, and that was right around the time we were developing the scenario for GridEx VII. As you can imagine, that featured very heavily. There were plenty of cyber injects that featured in that exercise as well, but there was some feedback we received asking us to bring it a little more into balance, so we'll refocus on that for VIII. Now, one other thing I want to mention is that we have a second part to the GridEx exercise. There's the big 2-day exercise that happens all at once. It's live, it's operational, it's very exciting. We also have an executive tabletop exercise that focuses on the strategic and policy level decision-making that occurs between predominantly two groups. There is the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, or ESCC, and the Energy Government Coordinating Council, or EGCC. Now that tabletop exercise took place one day after the exercise, the live play exercise itself. We had over 200 industry leaders and government leaders participate in that exercise across 80 different organizations. And it featured various complex things separate from the scenario for the live play exercise, but that included things like data telemetry outages, or ICCP outages, long-term energy market disruption or outage, and then some joint cyber and physical attacks on substations that specifically targeted removing strategic ONG and LNG sites with power. Now, this exercise actually featured a geographic focus on kind of the center of the continent. So we featured the central United States and also Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So SaskPower, Manitoba Hydro got very involved there. The kind of the takeaways from this exercise, and I won't again spend too long on, oh, my apologies. This is what it looked like. We were able to do this in a great hybrid environment. That's our DC office for NERC and the EISAC. And we were really able to have a good group of folks in the room and also a good group of folks online. We had Natural Resources Canada, Public Safety Canada, the Cyber Center, Electricity Canada, all participating in that, as well as I mentioned, SaskPower and Manitoba Hydro had kind of a scenario focus. And the recommendations, again, you can find all the recommendations from this tabletop exercise on our public lessons learned report. But these focused a lot on communications and the resilience of communications, both for data and for voice. Specifically, that voice communications that would be needed at a very high level, at a strategic level during a large-scale crisis. If there is a regional crisis, typically regions, reliability coordinators, transmission operators, et cetera, can handle these problems themselves. But as this expands into a more national or international level crisis, that strategic coordination with these coordinating councils becomes much more important. Now, when we asked those folks during the exercise, how will you coordinate? They say, oh, we'll just hop on a WebEx or a Teams call or a Zoom or what have you, or I'll give them a phone call. Well, what if the phone services are down? What if the internet is down? And then we had less answers. So that has been a big focus of those resilient communications efforts in the aftermath, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we have been doing since this exercise. We also talked a little bit about supply chain and restoration priorities, kind of that communication between governments and the industry, ensuring that these priorities are hopefully the same, but when they might diverge, maybe for national security reasons or something else, how would those decisions be made? There was need for a little more clarity, so there's additional discussions that will need to happen in the aftermath of this. And then we looked at prolonged energy market disruption. I think we think about energy markets and think, okay, well, that's money side. You know, we focus on reliability. There are points at which, if those disruptions to those systems last for long enough, that can bleed into reliability as well. And so we explored that with this scenario. Typically, if you have a disruption of these energy markets, of loss of data or things like that, it might last for an hour or a few hours. That is typically what folks are prepared for and are considering. But when we take that to days or weeks, that became a much larger challenge to consider. So I want to highlight a few things that we've done since GridEx VII that have improved the resilience of the bulk power system in general. And that includes an improvement to the Reliability Coordinator Hotline, or RC Hotline. You may be familiar with this, but it is a telephone bridge system hosted by NERC, which can be activated to contact all reliability coordinators all at once during a crisis. And back in May, the NERC completed upgrades to that hotline, adding secondary system infrastructure. This provides the RC hotline with instant failover capabilities, which it did not have before, even if the primary server is completely taken out of service. That upgrade has been tested. It is now fully functional, and the associated user's procedure has been codified and distributed. So instant improvement right there. We also have done additional efforts in resilient communications, recognizing, if you look back over the last 3 GridExes, so that would be 6 years, about 60% of our recommendations have been related in some way to communications. Now, communications is a very large topic. So we kind of have to hone in on a small portion if we want to necessarily make any movement. I think part of the problem in the past has been trying to tackle that as one big subject. So finding bits and pieces where we can make improvement, we'll see a little more success than trying to take the whole burger in one bite, so to speak. So as I mentioned, there was that high-level strategic coordination during a very large-scale crisis, and running into those problems with not having a real good answer when your primary or alternate method of communication is out. So we have actually retained the services of Haggerty Consulting. They are contractors who have worked with us on previous GridExes, GridEx VI, GridEx VII, and they are with us for GridEx VIII as well. And they will be doing a comprehensive review of resilient communications capabilities of the participating organizations for the tabletop. This is, again, primarily focusing on that electricity subsector coordinating council at this point, just to make the scope manageable. But they'll be looking at those communications capabilities. They'll present a full report of findings and a set of next steps and recommendations to further improve our current standing as far as resilient communications goes for that leadership level coordination, that strategic level coordination across the industry. To support that, what we are also doing at the EISAC is we're adding an additional capability to the EISAC portal that will effectively work as a PACE inventory. For those not familiar with PACE, it's the primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency levels of communication. Ensuring that we have an inventory, at least for the members of this industry coordinating council, would go a long way towards solving some of those issues that we ran into during the exercise. So interested to see where that goes. That is, it's actually implemented. The infrastructure is already there. We're currently populating that directory, and then we will have it ready by the end of the year. I also want to highlight the Universal Utility Data Exchange, or UUDEX. Back in April, after we issued these recommendations and we focused on the resilience of data communications between control centers and how that could kind of grind some things to a halt if it were disrupted, the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, or CSER, convened an industry webinar on this technology in coordination with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, or PNNL. UUDEX, I apologize, I am not an expert. I couldn't explain this diagram if I wanted to, but it is a technology framework that could transform the ICCP infrastructure that we currently have in the industry. It is more resilient, it's easier to stand up and to expand. And this webinar discussed some of the strengths and logistics of this infrastructure, and it also laid out some next steps for potential broader adoption. The very exciting news so far is that there is currently a contract negotiation underway with GE Research that will be taking this project on to validate it, to harden it, and to standardize it so that UUDEX could potentially replace the ICCP protocols that are currently in use ubiquitously throughout the transmission system. They are doing that in coordination with the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And our hope is that will lead to additional resilience improvements for data communications throughout the entire grid. And the last note there being that energy market resilience, as I mentioned, this was a heavy feature for our scenario. That is something that is being focused on with the ISO RTO Council. They will be bringing long-term electricity market system or data unavailability solutions. They'll be looking at alternate market pricing options as a topic for discussion, again, during a crisis like this. They'll be bringing that up with the ISO RTO Markets Committee. And in support of these efforts, PJM has also shared their best practices. They had done some work on this in the past, this long-term energy market disruption. And they're sharing some steps taken with the RTO community if markets are disrupted for extended periods of time. So I know I just rambled on for a very long time about various improvements. I hope you'll trust me that in general, it's really exciting to see that the whole reason that we do this GridEx exercise, is to ensure that we are making these improvements. We are seeing measurable changes in our resilience, in our security posture, to ensure that if that day ever comes, we are a little more ready, we are a little more prepared, and we can take a few more hits than we might have before. So with that, I do want to talk about the current exercise we are working on, GridEx VIII. As you can see, that is coming in November 18 and 19, 2025. Mark your calendars. The big focus that I want to mention here, as we looked at those lessons learned and those action items and practicing crisis coordination in an attack scenario on the bulk power system, the power of GridEx is that you are able to bring together not just your organization, but neighboring organizations. If you're a reliability coordinator or a region, all the organizations within your footprint, cross-sector partners, government partners, and so on. And you can all practice this coordination together during a nice blue sky day and not the real thing all at once. And I have seen the amount of improvements that I've seen come out of these past GridEx exercises has been wonderful. To see folks entirely change the ways they mobilize personnel during a crisis, or the ways that they notify field personnel, the ways that they manage reporting for work during a crisis, the way that they manage how they process, how they proceduralize load sheds. I've seen a lot. For this time around, what I really want us to focus on for GridEx VIII is, in a way, bringing it back to the basics. I have talked about how GridEx VII, everyone expanded and added more complexity, and I want to enable larger organizations to continue to do that. But one thing we did notice as we looked at past GridExes is that since GridEx V in 2019, we've had fewer organizations participate. It's started to drop off, at least organization-wise. We've had more people playing, but that's just because everybody who is here is still going bigger. So we dug into that information a little more. We sought feedback. Why are we losing some organizations? And the answer, very clearly, is that we are, as I said, bigger and more complex than ever. And that means that smaller planning teams are getting a little bit left behind. And we see some smaller organizations that look at GridEx and see all the materials that we provide, and they say, well, I have one person I can commit to plan this entire exercise, and that person also wears 5 other hats. So I don't know if we can participate this year. And so sometimes they don't. So what we'd like to focus on this time is bringing that back around, kind of finding ways to repackage GridEx to make it more manageable for these smaller planning teams and bring them back into the fold, while still serving all of the needs of those larger organizations that want to go big. Now, the way that we're going to do that involves a few different things. Just to give you an idea of how we put all this together, it involves, of course, leadership from the top, from our NERC and EISAC CEOs, our Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement. We also have a core GridEx planning team that kind of manages the cutting room floor, so to speak, and keeps everything moving forward. But the main work comes from that center group of teams. Those teams are entirely composed of subject matter experts and folks who were nominated throughout the industry, throughout Canada, the US, and Mexico, who have volunteered their time to contribute to the design and development of GridEx VIII. And those teams have actually started up. They're not necessarily full, so if you know somebody who would be interested in joining these teams and they have good ideas on scenario, we would love to hear them. But the design team is very much focused on building that scenario out. The reliability coordinator team was a new one that we put together in GridEx VII that really focuses on reliability coordinators and their role in the exercise. Hydro-Quebec featured heavily on that team in GridEx VII. The subject matter expert teams, of course, focusing on both cyber and physical to make sure that we're generating realistic scenarios and injects and making sure that it comes across well to the planners who are participating. And that's where the right side comes in. All those 252 organizations, or hopefully more this time around, will have their own local planners. And they will receive all of the materials that we generate from these first 2 sets of teams, and they will take it, customize it, make it their own, make it apply to each of their organizations' areas or footprints, and then let it all play out for their players. It is incredibly complex to kind of see come together all at once, but you have all of these overlaying exercises happening all throughout North America, all at the same time across those 2 days. And you find, as we talked about in previous talks here today, you might have a tie line between 2 areas trip, and now they have to practice that coordination and communication to ensure that they're meeting those requirements. We also feature several points where reporting criteria is met guaranteed. We always push it to the point where firm load shed usually needs to happen at some point in the scenario. And then, of course, there's all the reporting criteria that comes with that. So being able to practice those processes right along with our regions, our reliability coordinators, is critical. Just a quick timeline to give you a sense of what to expect. We do have our first big planning meeting coming up at the end of this month, October 29. We do have 2 more planning meetings scheduled throughout the next few months. And then we also have a series of training webinars that we do. This will be similar to what we did for GridEx VII. But these training webinars are opportunities to focus in on various aspects of planning for GridEx, whether that's a webinar just designed for beginners, whether it's a webinar very focused on engaging external partners and cross-sector partners, or it could be something else. And then, of course, distributed play happens in November. It is over a year out, especially if you're a larger organization that wants to go big. You will be very surprised how quick that year goes by if you're planning for an exercise. So starting early is always good. Now, some of the things that we want to focus on for GridEx VIII, I've mentioned a few of them before, but we really want to, as we always have, focus on the threats that we are facing today and the threats that we're facing in the future. It's why we bring those teams together. I'm not the one out there dealing with this every day, every moment, but the folks that we bring into those teams are. And getting their input on what might be the most concerning thing on the horizon and what keeps them up at night, that's exactly how we stay ahead of these things. It's been nice to see how GridEx over the years has really been ahead of many of these threats. One claim to fame that we now have is that in 2017, for GridEx IV, we had, I don't know who it was who suggested it, but someone had mentioned, hey, you know what we should have? Let's have a pandemic scenario. Because I don't think folks have their pandemic plans set up very well. And so they added it to GridEx IV. In the aftermath of GridEx IV, utilities all across North America updated their pandemic plans and created more robust plans for that. I know there were several utilities that didn't have one before that, but then they made it. And then it wasn't as funny after 2020, but we all joked about it at the time and we called it the exercise flu, and yeah, not as funny anymore, but definitely gave us a lot of benefits there. So other things we're gonna focus on for GridEx VIII. One thing I wanna highlight, and I'm very excited about this because we haven't done it before, we want to have in the background of our GridEx VIII scenario, hosting a global event of some kind. You may be aware that there are some pretty major global events coming to the North American shores in the next few years. GridEx will be in 2025. In 2026 is what? I think I heard it. The World Cup. Yeah, the World Cup is in, and that is affecting Canada. It's affecting the US. It's affecting Mexico. I know Montreal won't be getting a World Cup game, but I think Toronto and Vancouver will be. Of course, Montreal is not a stranger to hosting global events. As a Formula One fan, I have on my bucket list seeing a Canadian Grand Prix here. Haven't yet. But this is the kind of thing that we want to have in the background. We won't call it the World Cup. It'll be the World Mug, the World Goblet or something. But we'll have some global event happening. And I think what this will do is ensure that we have an easier way of bringing in law enforcement and government partners as well to kind of show them the value of that. Because I know many law enforcement and government partners are very focused on this. I know out in California, looking ahead to 2028, the Olympics being out there as well, very, very hot topic. Folks are already planning for it. So we are doing that. We're also going to refine our cyber index, as I mentioned, for more usability, more accessibility, kind of refocus on that cyber aspect. And then I mentioned enhancing engagement with state, local, and provincial governments, broadening electricity industry participation. And I believe the way that we can do that is by improving accessibility for these smaller planning teams, as I mentioned. And so what we are doing is, just to give you a sense of what they are usually seeing, this is all of the planner materials we provided for GridEx VII. Many of these documents are 20-plus pages. The GridEx VII measle or master scenario events list itself is a massive document. It's kind of this huge Excel spreadsheet. And if you're one person in charge of the whole planning, it may just look like a little too much to deal with. So what we are going to do is shrink this down as one version of the exercise, still keeping all of that stuff available in GridEx VIII for those who need it. Because, to be clear, there are organizations that will take all of this material, they will use it all, and then they will also make their own, and they will expand upon it, and they'll customize it, and they go crazy. And it's great to see. But for those smaller planning teams, I want to give them an exercise plan and 2 master scenario events lists or measles. And they can pick or choose the combination of them both. Some organizations really just want to do the cyber side. Some just really want to do the physical side, or they can combine them together into one. But even if you combine them into one, however you slice it, this will be a smaller version of the scenario and of the exercise. But the great part is, it will still maintain all the main scenario beats of the big version. So if a small organization is using one of these kind of GridEx in a box packages, they will still have a scenario that lines up with all of the larger organizations that they might be participating with. In addition, because after I told this plan to some of the folks giving us feedback and we kind of shopped this around, just about everybody has been very excited about this idea and said, this is great, this is going to bring people back. But there's still some organizations that say, look, I don't even have the time for that. I can't do a full-scale exercise some years. And so, as a last resort, if that can't be done, we want to remove the measle entirely and also create a tabletop package as well. So that if there is nothing else that they can do, if they can't do that live exercise on that day, hey, we're going to give you a PowerPoint presentation that is completely plug and play, and it is based off of the scenario that we developed for GridEx VIII. It'll still have all the main scenario beats. You'll have a facilitator guide that can walk you right through it. If you want to add a little customization to make it your own, that's fine, but if you don't have the time for it, this will still be something that you could bring in at a high level to a group of folks that you bring together, run through a tabletop, and you can get something out of this exercise and this scenario that a lot of very smart people are putting together. I'm not including myself in that. I just trust all the experts. So hopefully that comes through as something useful and beneficial to folks. Everything I've heard so far, at least in theory, is that everybody likes this idea. We're going to be putting this together as we put together all the other materials. This is probably going to be ready for everyone by May of 2025, and then these smaller organizations will be able to carry this forward and participate if they hadn't been before. And in closing, I don't know where I'm at on time here. I'm doing okay, right? Hey, great. I'm happy to announce that we actually just last week opened up our planner registration for GridEx VIII that is available on our website. That big green button doesn't say that anymore on the website. Now it says register for GridEx. So if you do know anybody who would be a planner for your organization, please have them hop on and register. What that does is it gives them access to all of the planning materials that we provide over the course of the planning. Once it's ready, it goes to them. So a lot of folks start getting things going a little early. And again, if anybody is participating in those design teams or planning teams, they get a little bit of early access to that so they can start adding some input there. And in the end, I just want to say thank you once again for this opportunity to speak to you all on GridEx. I really do believe in the power of these exercises and their ability to increase our resilience in the face of these attacks or hazards or whatever you might want to call them. But in the end, we want to be able to move that needle just a little bit. Anything that we can do to take a lesson learned, to take an action item forward, and then become a little more resilient, that means something. So if you have any questions about GridEx, you can reach me personally there. My email on the screen. There is also the GridEx team inbox, gridex@eisac.com. And again, thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Merci beaucoup, Jess. Est-ce qu'on a des questions dans la salle?
I see a question.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Stéphane Desbiens from Hydro-Québec. You briefly mentioned something about the utility, universal utility data exchange.
Yeah.
I was wondering, is EIDSN involved in this project?
I would love to be able to answer that question. As I mentioned, I know not as much as I wish I did on the UDX program. I do know that the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, if you look up PNNL and UUDEX, they have some research papers publicly posted that talk about what they have explored with that, and it talks a little bit more about the technology. So if you can understand it, which I bet you can much better than I, you might find the answer to your question there.
All right, thank you.
I hope that helps. I'm very sorry.
No problem, thank you.
Any other questions there?
Mireille.
Ooh.
Hello.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that presentation. I learned a lot there. You know, I'm on the compliance side, so I'm going to obviously have some sort of compliance question about the, you know, GridExes. So these event exercises really can be utilized to, you know, test how our compliance standards may see weaknesses during, you know, times of strain. I understand that the NERC standards are very much to prevent these events, big events from happening, not so much attacks. But I wanted to get an understanding of, you know, do you see a lot of compliance involvement when you do these GridExes so that they could, you know, take them back, take the lessons learned back, and possibly improve the standards themselves?
Yeah, so great question. First of all, thank you for that. It's been really interesting to see how different organizations have used GridEx as a tool for compliance. We do make it very clear, I'm coming from the EISAC, I have no compliance role, it's by design, and the exercise itself is not designed to necessarily test any compliance. We try and be very clear with that because it's to maintain that information sharing concept. But we absolutely encourage folks to use it in that way to test some of their compliance aspects, and many have. So I can't give any specific examples here, but in general, we have seen people use it to test their reporting requirements. We've seen them use it to test more general reliability concepts, but more importantly, oftentimes it happens by accident. They run through their processes, they run through their response, they go through the exercise, and at the end of it, they might spot something and go, oh, okay, well, this is something we can do to improve either our ability to maintain compliance or, you know, in a rare case, possibly catch a part where they're not compliant. You know, that's not ideal, but you want to catch it there before it being caught somewhere else. So we have seen that happen in the past, and that has proved very beneficial to folks who engage with it. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Okay, great.
D'autres questions de la salle? Any other questions? On Zoom? No. Okay, I have one. I'm in the room. So one thing that strikes me is, you know, outreach to smaller entities. Mm-hmm. And if you go back, please, to the previous slide, 19th, okay? So, just here. 19, this one. EISAC members and partners can register planners on the EISAC website. One of the, you know, reasons that participation was going down, it was that you have to be a member, I don't know, of EISAC. Is it still the case?
That is a great question. And we are currently, the policy remains, yes, EISAC member or partner. That being said, to get access to the EISAC to be a member of the ISAC portal, or at least for your organization to be on that. It is free. It's not there's no charge there, and you can kind of engage with the EISAC wherever you wish. The main reason folks join the EISAC is to gain access to those security notifications, those various portal posts that are put out. We have our cyber and physical security analysts who are constantly receiving shared security threat information from around the utility world. And they're able to analyze that and then share it with members and partners so you can get up-to-date information on threats that are currently impacting the system. So that is why folks join. I didn't want to turn it into a sales pitch for the EISAC or anything like that, but not much of a sales pitch. Again, it's free. But the point there being that for now, that is a requirement. It's something we're talking about. We have heard the feedback, and we're trying to find ways to ensure that if there is someone who wishes to engage with GridEx, but is either unable to become an EISAC partner or member, or simply does not wish to be, there is still a way for you to engage with the exercise. And I should be clear, you absolutely can still engage with GridEx without being an EISAC member or partner. You just won't be able to register on the official planner's site. But the best way to get involved if you are not on the EISAC portal, if you are not a member, if that is not an option, they can also reach out to any other entity that is participating in GridEx. So we often encourage folks to reach out to their reliability coordinator or to their transmission provider. And those entities more likely are going to be on the EISAC portal. They will have access to the planning materials, because that's the only thing you actually get out of that registration is access to the planning materials. But if you connect with someone else who has that, it's not a secret. It's just, these are the planning materials. If you want to pass that on to additional organizations you're planning with, you absolutely can.
Good. Thank you very much.
I hope that helps.
Yes, because we know who is the reliability coordinator for Quebec Interconnection.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you very much. I don't have any questions. I don't know in the room. No. Good. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Almost right on time. Thank you very much, Jess. Merci beaucoup. Le temps de reprendre le séminaire pour d'autres présentations aussi intéressantes que celle à date. Je vais inviter maintenant Madame Maxime Doucet, vice-présidente aux opérations Innov &E, pour nous présenter la recherche collaborative, accélérer les innovations et renforcer la fiabilité du transport d'électricité.
Merci. Vous m'entendez bien? Oui? Okay. Super. C'est bon. Super. Bonjour, je m'appelle Maxime Doucet, je suis vice-présidente aux opérations chez Innov. Aujourd'hui, je vais vous présenter Innov, qui on est, qu'est-ce qu'on fait, mais aussi le programme de financement de la recherche collaborative qu'on a mis en place en partenariat avec la Régie de l'énergie depuis 2022. Donc, premièrement, Innov, c'est un regroupement sectoriel de recherche industrielle, donc un RSRI dans le jargon. Les RSRI, c'est des regroupements qui ont été désignés par le gouvernement du Québec pour stimuler et financer la recherche collaborative dans les secteurs jugés stratégiques pour l'économie du Québec. Donc, il y en a un en aéronautique, il y en a en technologie de l'information, il y en a dans les matériaux avancés. Et nous, on est celui en énergie électrique, puis on existe depuis 2012, donc depuis plus de 10 ans. Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien ou il y a comme de la réverbération? C'est tout beau? OK, juste moi. Donc, pourquoi la recherche collaborative? Pourquoi ces 9 organisations-là ont décidé d'utiliser l'outil de la recherche collaborative? C'est assez simple. Dans le fond, quand on regarde c'est quoi les principaux freins à l'innovation dans les entreprises, on remarque que le financement des projets d'innovation, les risques liés aux projets d'innovation arrivent en tête, évidemment. Il y a aussi le manque de main-d'œuvre, manque d'expertise, manque d'équipement. Donc, nous, avec la recherche collaborative, ce qu'on fait, c'est qu'on va lier les chercheurs universitaires, les chercheurs aussi dans les centres collégiaux de transfert de technologie avec des entreprises pour qu'elles puissent faire ensemble et accélérer leurs projets d'innovation. Puis pour nous, c'est dans le domaine de l'industrie électrique, évidemment. Donc, en gros, chez Innover, ce qu'on fait, c'est stimuler, accompagner et financer des projets de recherche. On a mis ici là, nos 4 principaux secteurs stratégiques de recherche. Donc, je vous dirais que la moitié de nos projets, on a environ 50 projets actifs en ce moment. La moitié sont dans le domaine du transport électrique et intelligent et l'autre moitié dans le domaine de l'énergie. Donc, on parle de production d'énergie, on parle de transport, distribution, stockage, évidemment, et optimisation aussi de l'utilisation de l'énergie électrique. Alors, comment on fait pour stimuler, accompagner, financer? Des exemples. Par exemple, on peut participer activement à des études, des rapports qui sont d'intérêt pour nos membres, mais aussi pour les membres de l'écosystème. Donc, avec la grappe des transports électriques et intelligents, l'année passée, on a publié le rapport, le livre blanc sur l'hydrogène vert, donc un rapport sur le potentiel d'adoption de l'hydrogène vert dans le transport routier longue distance. Et on organise aussi des événements de différentes envergures, mais toujours en mettant de l'avant le maillage, la possibilité de se rencontrer, d'amener des collisions d'idées. Donc, comme vous pouvez voir, notre prochain événement qu'on organise a lieu dans moins de 2 semaines au parc Jean-Drapeau, et c'est sur la transition énergétique. Donc, je pense que ça pourrait intéresser certaines personnes dans la salle, là. Notamment, on va parler de questions là, de fiabilité d'un réseau en pleine croissance, là, évidemment. Ensuite, côté accompagné, donc une fois qu'on a semé les graines, les idées de la recherche collaborative, bien les gens viennent nous voir puis ils peuvent avoir différents besoins. Donc une entreprise peut se présenter chez nous et nous dire, écoute, j'ai ce projet-là d'innovation. Par contre, il me manque un expert dans tel domaine ou j'ai besoin de tel équipement pour mettre en œuvre ce projet-là. Pouvez-vous nous aider? Et bien évidemment, bien nous, on a une grande banque de données. On connaît plusieurs personnes dans les universités, dans les centres de recherche ou d'autres entreprises aussi. Donc, on les met en lien ensemble. Une fois qu'on les a mis en lien, on peut les aider dans la rédaction de la demande. Ça, c'est quand même un service qui est généralement apprécié parce que ça peut être long et ardu, une demande de financement. Donc, on peut aider sur tout ce qui est veille, études technologiques, optimisation du montage financier. Aider aussi à les coacher avant le comité d'évaluation, parce qu'il faut savoir que nous, c'est pas nous qui évaluons les projets à l'interne, mais ils sont évalués par des experts indépendants à notre organisation. Puis une fois que les projets sont recommandés, ben on s'occupe du financement et de tous les déboursés. Et c'est là qu'arrive le programme Fiabilité, un de nos chouchous, je dois le dire, là, parce qu'il nous permet à nous, Innover, en une seule demande, de pouvoir financer jusqu'à 80% des dépenses des projets qui nous sont soumis. Donc, juste peut-être vous expliquer un peu comment est né ce programme-là. En 2022, la Régie de l'énergie est venue nous voir. Puis, elle souhaitait trouver une façon de stimuler puis d'accélérer les innovations dans le transport d'électricité. Donc, ce qu'on leur a proposé, c'est de faire un programme qui leur permettrait d'utiliser les sanctions qu'elles récupèrent dans leur compte distinct pour financer la recherche collaborative dans leur domaine d'intérêt, c'est-à-dire la fiabilité du transport d'électricité, auquel on pourrait venir matcher un autre de nos programmes qu'on utilise, là, qui nous vient du ministère de l'Économie, de l'Innovation et de l'Énergie, notre programme régulier. Donc, ça, c'est, comme j'ai dit, c'est un programme qui est intéressant parce qu'en une seule demande, on peut aller chercher un maximum de financement des dépenses admissibles et ça permet justement de stimuler vraiment les projets dans ces secteurs-là. On a eu un premier appel à projet qui a été très populaire et qui nous a permis de financer 2 projets. Donc, peut-être juste pour vous donner une idée, ça peut ressembler à quoi là, des projets dans le programme fiabilité. Ici, je vais vous résumer brièvement les 2 projets là, qu'on a recommandés pour le financement. Donc, le premier projet, c'est un projet en collaboration entre l'École des technologies supérieures et PLP Canada. C'est un projet qui est mené par le professeur Sébastien Lalonde, qui est spécialiste en mécanique des câbles et en endommagement en fatigue, et l'entreprise PLP Canada, qui était anciennement Helix Uniformé. Eux, c'est un concepteur fabricant de produits de précision pour l'industrie de l'énergie électrique, entre autres. Donc, c'est un projet qui va commencer en janvier 2025 et qui vise une meilleure compréhension des comportements vibratoires des conducteurs. Il vise aussi à développer un concept d'amortisseur de vibration à récupération d'énergie et finalement, il souhaite optimiser les méthodes de réparation des conducteurs. Le projet va permettre la formation de 4 étudiants. Puis, si tout se passe bien, là, il vise aussi le dépôt de 2 brevets à l'issue de ce projet-là. C'est un projet d'une valeur de près de 420 000 $, pour vous donner une idée. Le deuxième projet, c'est un projet qui est mené par l'éminent professeur en génie électrique de l'Université Laval, le professeur Innocent Camois. C'est un projet d'1,2 million en partenariat avec Opalerté et Hydro-Québec. Pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas, Opalerté, c'est une entreprise québécoise qui développe, fabrique des jumeaux numériques, donc des simulateurs en temps réel, qui sont vraiment très utilisés là, dans le domaine du transport et de la distribution d'énergie. Je pense que tout le monde connaît Hydro-Québec, là, mais peut-être juste préciser que c'est le centre de recherche, là, donc l'IREC, qui fait partie de ce projet-là, plus spécifiquement leur unité simulation et évolution des réseaux. Donc, c'est un projet de niveau de maturité technologique plutôt faible, donc c'est vraiment très au niveau de la recherche, là, on parle d'un TRL 2 qui souhaite terminer en TRL 3 pour ceux qui sont familiers avec ce jargon. Puis, eux visent en fait à préparer le réseau de transport électrique de demain parce que, évidemment, là, on le sait, là, le réseau de transport va devenir plus dynamique, plus complexe, plus interactif. Donc, il faut être capable de mettre en place, là, dès maintenant, se préparer dès maintenant à mettre en place les outils qui vont permettre de maintenir la stabilité et la fiabilité du réseau. Donc, c'est un projet assez complexe, là, donc je ne voulais pas rentrer dans les détails, là, mais si vous avez d'autres questions sur le projet, vous pouvez me demander par la suite. Les retombées visées, c'est la formation de plusieurs étudiants. Donc, on parle ici de 2 postdoctorats, 7 PhD, 2 maîtrises. Puis, Hydro-Québec et Opalerté, avec lesquels on fait déjà là, plusieurs projets, ont signifié que dans le cadre de ce projet-là aussi en particulier, ils souhaitaient recruter évidemment à la suite du projet certains étudiants qui vont avoir travaillé avec eux dans le cadre de ce projet-là. Voilà. J'ai mis ici les domaines là, et les thèmes admissibles au programme fiabilité, mais je voulais terminer là, en vous disant en fait que le programme sert pas seulement à financer des projets de recherche, mais ça sert aussi à former la main-d'œuvre dans vos domaines d'activité. C'est vraiment une façon de mettre les étudiants en contact avec les entreprises en les faisant travailler sur des projets très concrets qui vont avoir un impact positif pour vous puis pour nous en tant que société québécoise. Voilà. Est-ce que vous avez des questions? Rien?
Juste, on verra s'il y a des questions dans la salle, juste pour être sûr et certain. Questions sur le Zoom. Ben, moi, j'ai une mini-question. Quel est, par exemple, le délai entre la demande d'une entreprise qui dit « j'ai cette idée, j'aimerais la matérialiser » et le lancement du projet en tant que tel?
Il n'y a pas de délai fixe, mais en moyenne, ben, c'est sûr que s'il n'y a pas eu de maillage, on va prendre des entreprises qui se connaissent déjà avec un professeur qui connaît les entreprises. Je dirais qu'en 6 à 9 mois, on peut passer du dépôt de la demande au début du projet.
D'accord.
Grosso modo.
Merci beaucoup, ça donne un estimé de temps. Merci beaucoup. Bon, merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. Je vais inviter Madame Directrice Harkness, directrice de l'ingénierie de la NERC, pour nous présenter les ressources énergétiques distribuées et stratégies des ressources d'énergie raccordées aux moyens d'onduleurs, ou IVR, impact sur la fiabilité, activité et perspective.
All right, this presentation is going to be in English, but I will say bonjour. And thank you to the Régie for having me today. I'm here on behalf of my boss, Sujin Kim, the Vice President, but I have no issues with filling in. Make sure you get my good side, Ugo. I've known Ugo for a long time, so he's up with my antics here. So this presentation is going to focus on highlighting parts of the inverter-based resource strategy as well as the distributed energy resource strategy. So with the IBR strategy, we're going to start here, and I just wanted to put this here because I have 2 slides in here. One's going to be just this plain slide that says IBR strategy, and then there's going to be one that says DER strategy, so you can see where we're transitioning in the presentation. So here is the elaborate inverter-based resources strategy. All the things that I'm presenting today, you will be able to find on our NERC.com. And if you can't find those, please feel free to reach out to me or Ugo or Jesse as well, and we can direct you in the right place for those locations on our webpage. So for the IBR strategy, what you see here, there are 4 tenets: risk analysis, interconnection process improvements, best practices in education, and regulatory enhancements. And so as we all know, with the rapid interconnection of inverter-based resources, there's significant drivers of grid transformation and poses a high risk to BPS reliability. So with the speed of change continues to challenge the planners, operators, and protection engineers, and many other facets of the electricity sector, But implemented correctly, these inverter-based technologies can have great benefits to the BPS as well. With that being said, the ERO enterprise has analyzed numerous widespread IBR loss events and identified many systemic performance issues that will be addressed through this strategy here. As far as the core tenets are concerned, this is a risk mitigation strategy, and this strategy also balances the near-term and long-term approaches to ensure reliable operation of the bulk power system. So let's back up a little bit. The reliability gap here. As you can see here, the gap kind of arose when all these IBRs started connecting to the grid. And there was a need for updated registrations as well as updating our standards. And so as we all know, or some of you may know, this work was prompted by FERC Order 901. And so in order for these entities to be compliant with the registration standards, as Laurentia stated in her presentation, they have to be registered. And so we have to register these entities. There is a work plan for registration, and there's a work plan to address these things within our standards. And so we're bringing them into the NERC compliance realm right now. Our rules of procedure were updated, and what you see here, the solution was for us to register generator owners and generator operators. We have the criteria here, and this criteria is reflected in those rules of procedure changes that were approved by FERC. And I'll pause here for you to read it before I transition. There we go. All right. Moving on. Registration milestones. And like I said, you can find all of these graphics on our website as well. So we are currently in phase 2. As you can see here, this is going from May of 2024 of this year into May of 2025 of next year. And so we are in the process of identifying all those Category 2 GO and GOPs as stated in our rules of procedure as outlined by the functions that they perform, as well as continuing to do outreach to let them know who we are, what we do, what they'll be responsible for. And this is done through quarterly updates on our website, as well as webinars and in-person workshops as well. We'll be moving into phase 3, May 2025 to May 2026 here. And so all of these entities need to be registered by May 2026. Making sure I didn't miss any of the highlights that I wanted to let you all know about. But I think we're good. All right, so let's move to the juicy part and the most contentious area that we're seeing right now, which is Order 901. And so Order 901 was issued by FERC in October of 2023. There are 4 milestones within this order to where NERC is having to address 63 directives. Okay, so this one order had 63 directives that we have to address. Those are broken up into 4 areas: data sharing, data and model validation, yes, planning and operational studies, and lastly, performance requirements. So our standards department, our registration department, our compliance department have come together and created this massive team that's been working diligently to make sure that we address all of these directives, and we have to deliver them in tranches. The first tranche was the work plan, and you'll see it on the next slide here as I transition. We have these 4 tranches, as you can see on the slide. We are now in milestone 2, to where we will have standards that we have to present to FERC for adoption November 4th of 2024. So just a little background on that. One of the projects, the standard, our board had to issue a Section 321 of our rules of procedure, which has never been done before, pretty much in the history of NERC. And so this was a path that we could take if we could not gain consensus through industry approval, which we did not. However, through this, there was a technical conference that was held. Many entities, OEMs, as well as NERC staff, regions, all came together to have these panels and to discuss, what's best for industry, what are the main issues, how do we address those issues to gain consensus on this standard. So since then, all of the standards have been posted again for additional ballots, final ballots. All of them are approved now. Woohoo! Like, that's a big relief for NERC. Our board is meeting next week to adopt those standards, and that agenda package is on the website as well, so you can see what the board will be adopting. Now, we are moving into milestone 3. And so as you can see here, milestone 3 is scheduled to be brought to FERC November 4th, 2025. Milestone 3, there have been SARs that have been taken to the Standards Committee, and our Standards Committee takes actions. The SAR stands for Standard Authorization Request, and this is how we initiate any standards project within NERC through a SAR. So with those SARs, they've been assigned to respective teams. We found that hindsight is 20/20 for all of us that we know. The technical conference added a lot of value in a platform. Slower, please. Okay. So, the technical conference, I'm going to date myself. How many of you had like a boom box, like a, where you play the tape and you could like make the tape go slow or fast. Like that was really fun. Okay. So I digress. I'm sorry. Milestone 3, what we found from the technical conference that we held, it was really, really valuable because it created a platform for everyone to come together to voice their opinions, their thoughts, share their expertise, and their directions on where we should go with the drafting of these standards. So we're going to do that again for Milestone 3. So stay tuned. You'll see a formal announcement come out in probably at the end of this year. It's slated for sometime in January. So if you want to be a part of that, attend, make sure you just look out for that because we're going to have those discussions on the front end before we start the drafting to help inform the drafting teams of how we should move. Is that okay? All right. And then we'll see Milestone 4. It'll start probably later next year and it'll be due in 2026. Some key takeaways from IBR. As we know, the grid transformation is happening extremely quick. And these penetrations of IBR are very high and they bring unique challenges that must be planned for and mitigated for the reliability of our system. Considering both current and future capabilities is important, as well as grid forming IBRs can enhance reliability now and under high penetrations. And you'll start hearing a little more talk about grid forming and grid following technologies as we move into this IBR, like as we continue to immerse ourselves in this IBR realm. So the coordination piece, as I stated before, we are all working together cross-departmentally with industry as well. And you see that a lot of our work was prompted by disturbance reports and lessons learned here, as well as us identifying those inverter-based issues and looking to develop standards and making considerations for existing facilities. That was a lot of the conversation for those legacy IBRs within the technical conference. Making sure that our models match. That's a big issue as well. Making sure that what we design for is what is actually built in the field and put in. Commissioning process improvements. You'll see we have a level 2 alert concerning IBR that is out now. We have a level 3 that will be published next year that will talk about some essential actions for IBR performance. So stay tuned for that as well. So here's my great slide. We're transitioning to the DER strategy. How am I on time, my friend? Very good. All right, so DER strategy. This is going to be very, very quick because a lot of the focus I wanted to put on IBR and the registration because that's where we are now. But DERs, they don't get a lot of attention, but because of the IBR, but we need to start paying attention to those as well. That better? Very good. All right. So the DER strategy here, we kept it in line with the same design graphic. You see the core tenets here for our DER strategy, which concerns modeling, incorporating DERs into our studies, operational impacts of DERs, and regulatory considerations. So what you see here below those 4 core tenets are the focus areas. And where I'm going to focus right now is on the NERC standards enhancements under regulatory considerations. And I'll talk a little bit about the aggregator, just a little bit. So as you know, NERC has a number of working groups and task force that work and report to our Reliability, Security, and Technical Committee. And so we have a working group, the System Planning Impacts for Distributed Energy Resources Working Group. For short, we call it the SPIDER Working Group. And so they are focused on a lot of tackling the issues around distributed energy resources. What I want to highlight here is when you look at the strategy, and there's this nice, I think, 10-page document on our website that kind of breaks up the 4 tenets, talks about the focus areas that I showed you on the graphic, and you'll see something there that says operational impacts of DER. And so this was real interesting to me, but NERC is proactively studying the risks associated with transmission, distribution, interface, and determining possible mitigating measures. And so that when we say transmission distribution interface, what we're saying is a TD interface is the electrical point, commonly a transformer, when the transmission system ends and the distribution system begins. And I don't want to offend the electrical engineers in the room. I have a civil engineering degree, so I like the plain explanation of these things as well. And also, it'll talk about the decentralization of generation. And when we talk about that, we mean all of the stuff that's coming online behind the meter. So for the regulatory considerations, there's a lot of words on here, and I'll give you time to read it. But what I want you to really focus on is those high-level bullets. There's an introduction of a DER aggregator from FERC Order 2222, and it provides this definition. And so in our engineering department, we have JP Skeet, who has taken the lead to draft an assessment on DER aggregators. And hopefully that will be published by the end of the year. Right now, it is being provided for opportunities to comment within the RSTC, and it should be finalized and published by the end of the year. The reliability standards enhancements, I have another slide that you'll see that'll give you a breakdown of what projects are addressing these issues. And cybersecurity is finding its way into everything, even with distributed energy resources. So this is an important part of research and assessments that we have to do there. We're continuing to do training and education, as well as engaging industry and doing some outreach. So these are the reliability standards projects here, and all of this is on our website as well. You can see we have 3 projects. The first one looking at demand and energy. The second one looking at interconnection procedures and the impact of interconnecting those new facilities. And the third being how BPS-connected inverter-based resources are considered, modeled, studied in the planning assessments. So this is my last slide here. These are resources, and so when they share the slides, I create a hyperlink so you can have quick access to a lot of the things that I discussed in this presentation. The goal of IBRs and DERs in the NERC realm is one, if I can simplify it, is to make sure that we have the right entities registered, that they are complying with the right standards, that those standards explain how they need to comply, and that entities are getting the right information to model, to study, to operate and plan the system. So with that, I will take questions.
Thank you very much, Directrice. Est-ce qu'on a des questions dans la salle?
All right.
Pour le moment, tout était... Everything was clear so far.
Okay, good.
Dans le Zoom. Thank you very much, Directrice, for this presentation. And if I understand, everything is on the NERC website.
Yes, and I do want to state that the Director of Standards Development, Jamie Calderon, she is a great resource as well because she's been overseeing a lot of this within the standards realm. So if you have any questions, please, you can reach out to me. I don't mind, but feel free to reach out to her as well.
We can see her email, for example, in one of the projects related to Order 901.
Yes, it's Jamie, Jamie, Calderon, CALDERON, at NERC.net.
Good. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Yes.
Hello. If we have time, just to make a quick comment in addition to what Latrice very well covered. Oh, I get to stand up?
Please, in this way, the people in the room will see you. Hugo Perez.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll be brief, but I just wanted to add, in addition to the great summary that Latrice presented, my name is Hugo Perez. I'm the manager of North American Relations at NERC. So significant amount of the work that I do is I'm very happy to do this work with the Canadian organizations, including the Régie and other regulators across Canada. So on the embedded-based resources, as you can see, there's significant amount of work going on in the US, but we do know that it's also going to impact Canada at some point in different points, depending on which province you're looking at. I mean, it's very clear that we do not have the authority, but we work very closely with the authorities like the Régie, for example, in this case in Quebec, and in coordination with MPCC as well. So in my role, we have been working with the Campus MRS, the Mandatory Reliability Standards Committee. I know Laurentia is involved with them to maintain them informed, right, about the progress on some of the items that Latrice covered today, and then I'll commit to continue to do that. Of course, the decision to change potentially some of the approaches in each province will be a decision by each province, but we'll make sure that they're informed and looking for consistency across all North America. So from that perspective, if you have any questions, I mean, of course, you will continue to work with the Campus MRS. Actually, in the next few weeks, we're starting to plan an update for them to give them some of the details on where we are from some of the details on the plans that Latrice described. But I just wanted to add that of course, we're always keeping Canada in mind as we go through some of this work in the US, because at the end of the day, I mean, the systems are going to behave the same, right, whether it's in the US or in Canada, and we want to ensure to the extent that we can consistency across North America. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for this additional information.
Alors, je me présente, Michel Garceau. Je suis avec les fonds de recherche du Québec depuis une douzaine d'années, déjà. Et je vais prendre quelques minutes pour vous présenter l'organisme, le FRQ, ou les fonds de recherche du Québec. Alors, c'est un organisme public financé par le gouvernement du Québec, dont l'objectif principal est de soutenir et promouvoir l'excellence et la recherche au Québec. La façon que c'est divisé, le FRQ, c'est divisé en 3 secteurs. Vous avez qui chapeaute les 3 secteurs, le scientifique en chef, Rémi Quirion, et ensuite les 3 secteurs, secteur nature et technologie, qui sont les sciences naturelles, le génie et les mathématiques. Le secteur santé, c'est la santé humaine, et société culture, qui est les sciences sociales, sciences humaines, arts et lettres. Alors nous, on finance la recherche. Et selon le thème de votre recherche, vous allez vous présenter à un des 3 secteurs. Et moi, je travaille pour le secteur nature et technologie avec la directrice scientifique, Janice Bailey. SQRI 2, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? C'est la Société québécoise pour la recherche et l'innovation, 2e mouture. On en a eu une il y a plusieurs années. En fait, le fonds a un budget annuel, puis il y a une SQRI qui s'est ajoutée de 7,5 milliards. Et l'objectif, c'est de favoriser certains thèmes comme l'excellence, excellent en recherche, créer un environnement favorable à l'innovation, commercialiser l'innovation, développer des talents et miser sur des secteurs d'avenir. Alors donc, on a notre budget régulier et à chaque période de 5 ans, c'est sur 5 ans, le gouvernement nous donne des secteurs prioritaires avec une enveloppe supplémentaire. Alors nous, au Fonds de recherche du Québec, Nature et Technologie, ce sont nos thèmes. Donc, si votre recherche entre dans un de ces grands thèmes-là, vous vous adressez à nous, je ne les lirai pas tous, là, mais chacun des secteurs du fonds a ses thèmes. Alors, chez nous, les priorités, c'est développer le talent. Je vais peut-être plus aujourd'hui m'attarder sur ce petit carré-là, parce que c'est mon dada aussi. Je suis responsable des programmes de bourse, donc c'est le soutien à la relève, c'est le développement des talents. Outre ça, par contre, on va aussi financer des projets de recherche en recherche fondamentale. Quand on parle de collaboration, 3 secteurs, c'est qu'il y a essayer de miser sur de la recherche, mais intersectorielle, qui fait appel à plusieurs secteurs. Alors, on a une direction pour ça spécifiquement. Bon, pour le reste, là, je n'entrerai pas dans le détail, surtout que je ne sais pas le détail de tout le reste. Moi, je suis pas mal dans le premier carré. Alors, chez nous, on a environ une 60aine de programmes. On peut dire que les programmes, ça se divise en 2 grandes parties, les subventions et les bourses. Bourses pour les étudiants. Les subventions, c'est lorsque les étudiants ont gradué, sont devenus des chercheurs, ils vont venir chercher chez nous les subventions. En ce moment, là, on a marqué calendrier des concours. Si vous aviez, vous pourriez voir tous nos concours, il y en a plus d'une 60aine. Hier, c'était le 2 octobre, c'est là où étaient les milliers de demandes. La date limite, c'était hier. Alors, c'est sûr que là, c'est peut-être pas consulté aujourd'hui, ce sera pour l'année prochaine, mais les étudiants ont tous soumis hier, là, ce qui fait que ce matin, moi, je me suis emmené ici, mais j'avais 200 courriels, je pense, dans ma boîte. Il va falloir que je regarde tantôt. Alors, comme je disais, programme de recherche en équipe, ça, c'est un programme de subvention, c'est les chercheurs qui se mettent en équipe et qui vont faire une demande de subvention chez nous. L'établissement de la relève professorale, c'est les nouveaux chercheurs. Donc, un étudiant qui a gradué, qui obtient un poste de professeur régulier dans une université au Québec, mais je vais dire un chiffre, je pense que c'est depuis moins de 5 ans. Plus de 5 ans, c'est pas ce programme-là. Ça sera la recherche en équipe. Il y a des programmes en partenariat et des programmes pour aussi une visibilité à l'international. Regroupement stratégique, c'est quelque chose de gros. C'est plusieurs chercheurs qui se regroupent, c'est des grosses subventions. Il y en a un à tous les 2 ans, je pense, là, des concours. Donc, nos concours, ça se divise pas mal comme c'est là, mais comme je vous disais, mon dada, c'est les bourses. On a des bourses de maîtrise, de doctorat et de post-doctorat. Les bourses de baccalauréat, on n'est pas trop là-dedans. On a des bourses thématiques dans plusieurs domaines qui sont évidemment dans les sciences naturelles et le génie, et on a une bourse avec la Régie de l'énergie, et c'est la raison aussi pour laquelle on m'a invité ici, il y avait un lien, c'est la bourse qu'on est en partenariat avec la Régie de l'énergie. On a des compléments de bourse avec le CRSNG, le Centre de recherche en sciences naturelles et génie au fédéral, puis avec d'autres organismes, d'autres types de bourses. En fait, on ne participe pas beaucoup. La gestion se fait sur les autres organismes. Nous, on donne l'argent dans les 2 derniers petits picots, là, CRSNG puis MITAX. Mais nos gros programmes, c'est les 2 premiers, là, maîtrise, doctorat, postdoc et les bourses thématiques. Donc, en chiffres, ça donne quoi? Ça donne environ 714 bourses de formation active. Il y en a des nouvelles à chaque année, il y en a qui terminent aussi à chaque année. Donc, à chaque année, on a à peu près 714 bourses. Pas loin de 2500 demandes par année qui entrent. 51 stages, c'est les stages postdoctoraux, pardon. Alors, c'est un peu ça dont on finance. Et ça représente le tiers du budget du FRQ. Les bourses, c'est le tiers du budget des fonds de recherche du Québec. J'aimerais toucher quelques programmes en partenariat. Bon, tantôt, je vais approfondir un peu la bourse avec la Régie de l'énergie, mais quand même, parce que peut-être que vous avez des connaissances, ça pourrait être utile. J'imagine que chez vous, peut-être qu'il y a des gens qui seront intéressés à l'étudier en France, par exemple, des programmes de maîtrise, des programmes d'échange, c'est le programme Frontenac. Il y a un programme pour étudiants étrangers aussi, qui viennent étudier ici au Québec. Donc oui, on facilite l'arrivée de talents étrangers aussi pour venir nourrir la recherche au Québec. Pardon. MITAX Globaling, je vais passer par-dessus, je ne le connais pas, mais c'est des programmes de stage aussi pour des étudiants internationaux. La bourse Réal d'Écosse, qui est une bourse de doctorat qui concerne les changements climatiques. Donc, c'est une bourse thématique pour les changements climatiques. Il y avait une bourse en aérospatiale avec le CRIAC, donc un partenariat avec le CRIAC. Je dis il y avait, c'est parce que l'entente, elle va être signée bientôt cette année, donc on n'a pas encore lancé le concours, mais lui, il viendra. Et finalement, la bourse avec la Régie de l'énergie, qui est à son troisième année, si je ne me trompe pas, cette année. Alors, son objectif, c'est comme les objectifs de tous les programmes de bourse. On veut soutenir la relève étudiante dans des domaines de recherche en sciences naturelles et génie. Mais évidemment, pour la Régie de l'énergie, c'est pas juste les sciences naturelles et le génie, c'est beaucoup plus pointu que ça. Le domaine ciblé par la Régie de l'énergie, là, c'est la fiabilité du réseau électrique. Prochaine diapositive, je pense que j'ai la vraie terminologie adoptée par la Régie. Alors, stimuler l'intérêt de la relève étudiante pour la recherche, puis soutenir l'excellence de la recherche, c'est-à-dire que c'est des bourses qui sont offertes par voie de concours. Donc, seulement les meilleurs ont ces bourses-là. Là. Si, je sais pas moi, s'il y a 10 demandes, il y a peut-être les 3-4 premiers qui vont avoir des bourses. Donc, c'est vraiment les meilleurs qui l'ont. La caractéristique de cette bourse, c'est une bourse de maîtrise qui dure 2 ans à raison de 25 000 $ par année. C'est des belles bourses. 25 000 $ par année dans nos programmes réguliers à la maîtrise, c'est 20 000. Alors là, on a quand même un bon montant de plus. C'est la même durée que nos programmes réguliers, ça veut dire 2 ans. Une maîtrise, on pense que ça se fait en 2 ans. On essaye de ne pas mettre des bourses beaucoup plus longues parce que l'objectif d'une bourse, c'est aussi de permettre à la personne de ne pas avoir à travailler temps plein pour se consacrer à ses études puis diplômer plus rapidement. C'est vraiment ça qui est l'objectif d'une bourse. Alors, si on mettait des bourses de maîtrise de 4 ans, ce serait peut-être plaisant pour les étudiants, mais on n'atteint pas l'objectif de diplomation rapide. Alors, les personnes visées par la bourse de la Régie de l'énergie, c'est des personnes qui étudient au 2e cycle universitaire dans une université au Québec. Donc, c'est-à-dire que la personne candidate n'a pas à être citoyenne canadienne, résidente du Québec. Il n'y a pas beaucoup de conditions. Ça peut être, c'est ouvert à n'importe qui. On ne regarde pas la nationalité, mais il faut que la recherche soit faite ici, au Québec. C'est de l'argent public qui va être dépensé ici, au Québec. Donc, dans une université du Québec. Et le domaine ciblé, comme je disais tantôt, c'est la fiabilité du transport d'électricité. Là, je ne vous les lirai pas tous, là. Surtout que je vais vous les laisser lire. Je vais laisser lire pendant que je vais aller boire de l'eau un peu. C'est les domaines. Le domaine ciblé, c'est la fiabilité du transport, mais il y a des secteurs prioritaires, ils sont là. Alors, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire pratiquement? Mais la personne qui fait une demande de bourse doit tout d'abord passer l'étape du domaine ciblé, qui était la diapositive avant. Elle sera en évaluation et après, la Régie a identifié des secteurs prioritaires. Il y a des critères d'évaluation qui tiennent compte de cela et son projet sera évalué en compte de ces secteurs prioritaires. La fiabilité du transport électrique, moi, ni personne au FRQ, eux, a les connaissances pour savoir c'est quoi, pour décider que ce projet-là, il est dans ce domaine-là. Alors, c'est la Régie de l'énergie qui va composer un comité d'experts à laquelle nous allons envoyer les demandes qui nous ont été transmises. Et ces experts-là vont décider si la demande de bourse est dans le domaine ciblé par la Régie. Une fois qu'ils sont passés au travers ce premier filet, ça revient chez nous. Et nous, on va s'occuper ensuite de l'évaluation. En fait, les fonds de recherche du Québec, c'est beaucoup ça, leur spécialité, c'est d'évaluer des demandes d'aide financière dans le domaine de la recherche. Alors, après ça, nous, on va faire l'évaluation et selon la décision de financement, si je ne me trompe pas, c'est la Régie de l'énergie qui la prend. Alors, selon, j'imagine, les moyens qu'ils ont, ce sera 1 bourse, 2 bourses, 3 bourses, tout dépendant comment il y a eu de demandes. Ici, on a fait un peu les critères d'évaluation. Comment ça se décompose? C'est pas mal toujours comme ça. On est à la maîtrise. Alors, à la maîtrise, beaucoup de choses sont faites dans le parcours académique. Il y a moins de publications puis des choses comme ça. Alors, c'est pour ça qu'il y a quand même des points qui sont donnés là. Intérêt potentiel en recherche, puis une présentation générale du dossier. 5 points, bon, évidemment. Présentation générale du dossier, c'est comme tout. Hein, il y a des fois, il y a beaucoup de fautes d'orthographe, puis les gens vont perdre des points. Mais des fois, je le sais parce que je l'entends. Même des fois, c'est peut-être plus que 5 points. Si vous connaissez des gens qui font des demandes de bourse ou des demandes de peu importe, soignez ça parce que les gens qui lisent, là, ils sont pointilleux sur sur l'orthographe et la clarté du texte. Un peu, ouais, bon, tantôt je disais qu'on en était à notre 3e concours, effectivement, donc le premier en 2023-2024, on avait eu 3 demandes admissibles. On en a peut-être eu plus, mais c'est analysé à la régie, mais c'est aussi analysé chez nous. On vérifie que bon, tout est là, tous les documents sont là, ils répondent à toutes les conditions. Alors, il y en a eu 3 d'admissibles, 3 financés. Tant mieux. Puis l'année passée, 2 d'admissibles, 2 financés. Mais l'an passé, on a eu plus de demandes, mais beaucoup ont été coupés parce qu'ils n'étaient pas dans le bon domaine. Ça, je vais vous dire, les gens, on voit qu'ils recherchent du financement parce qu'on reçoit des demandes dans plusieurs programmes et ça ne s'adresse pas à eux. Donc, ils ouvrent des formulaires puis ils demandent. Puis là, je vois que ça a dû être... C'est un peu en rapport avec l'énergie, fait que les gens lisent pas beaucoup, remplissent le formulaire. Fait que ça donne ça. Mais on avait eu plus de demandes cette année. Alors, je pense que l'année qui vient, là, j'ai pas le résultat, mais ça devrait être aussi bon parce que un concours fait de la publicité pour l'année d'après, puis l'année d'après, puis à un moment donné, ça se met à être connu. Les gens appliquent, les bonnes personnes appliquent, c'est-à-dire les personnes qui sont dans le bon domaine. Merci. Si vous avez des questions, ça va me faire plaisir d'y répondre.
Merci beaucoup. Et surtout, on apprécie l'intérêt pour les étudiants. S'il y a des questions dans la salle, présentement, concernant les programmes présentés, il y a quand même une question.
Juste une validation. C'est intéressant, il y a des gens qui reçoivent des bourses, subventions pour faire de la recherche. Comment on apprécie le résultat de tout ça?
Merci pour la question. C'était dans un des petits carrés que je suis passé tout droit parce que je ne suis pas le spécialiste des autres petits carrés. Depuis quelques années, je ne sais pas si ça va vraiment répondre à votre question, mais je pense un peu quand même. On a une politique, lorsque les projets de recherche sont financés par les fonds de recherche du Québec et que ça donne lieu à une publication scientifique, par exemple, bien, elle doit être en libre accès. Au début, on donnait 12 mois, je pense. Là, ça pouvait être sur des publications, sur des journaux payants. Mais après 12 mois, il fallait que ce soit en libre accès. Puis là, il me semble qu'il faut que ce soit immédiatement en libre accès. Alors, c'est un peu la façon que la recherche peut retourner à la société. Et il y a aussi chaque projet de recherche, chaque financement, à la fin, donne lieu à une exigence. Tu dois nous remettre un rapport. Mais le rapport est différent selon l'aide financière qui a été accordée. Et c'est là où on peut avoir un retour du projet financé envers le partenaire qui a financé aussi le projet. Donc, on va avoir un rapport du projet de recherche puis des résultats. Fait que c'est un peu ça. Ça répond un peu? Tout à fait. Merci.
Bon. Moi, j'aurais quand même une question. Donc, quand vous dites vous faites de la publicité, est-ce que vous êtes présente dans les universités du Québec? Comment vous réussissez à passer le message aux étudiants, au doctorat, à la maîtrise?
On a le département des communications et des réseaux sociaux. Je peux pas dire là, le vrai nom, mais il y a vraiment une personne attitrée pour les médias sociaux. Il y a un département pour les communications. Nous, on va faire aussi des présentations dans les universités, par exemple, à chaque année, un peu avant la présentation des bourses. Donc, ça a été cet été, là, au début de l'été. Puis, pendant l'été, on va donner 2 ateliers. J'ai pas le titre exact parce qu'il change année après année, mais en gros, je dirais, c'est présenter une demande de bourse gagnante. Je nommerais l'atelier comme ça. Ces ateliers peuvent se faire en présence, mais ils sont aussi, comme j'imagine vous ici, en mix, là. Donc, on peut l'avoir aussi sur virtuel. Cette année, j'ai vu qu'il y avait environ 400 personnes qui ont participé à l'atelier. Et là, on décrit un peu comment ça se passe dans les comités d'évaluation. Et ceci permet, j'imagine, à la personne d'écrire... en fait, c'est son projet de recherche qu'elle doit décrire. C'est ça la plus grosse écriture dans sa demande de bourse. Et ça va lui permettre, tout d'abord, d'être lu d'une façon agréable par un évaluateur qui en lit 20. Peut-être après le souper avec sa famille. Donc, c'est des trucs qu'on va donner pour que la personne conserve l'attention de l'évaluateur, puis qu'elle ait le meilleur d'elle-même qui est délivré. Des petits ateliers qu'on donne 2 fois par année.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Et une dernière question. Vous parlez que vous avez accordé environ 714 bourses de formation. C'est sûr qu'il y a aussi un comité de sélection, mais on a compris pour la régie, mais par exemple pour les autres programmes, comment ce comité de sélection est vraiment sélectionné? Comment vous l'organisez?
Non, oui, c'est une très bonne question. Je suis content parce que ça l'ouvre des très, très, très grandes portes. Nature et technologie, nous, tantôt on avait quelques domaines là, dans la diapositive, mais pour les bourses, mettons, il y avait 8-9 domaines, mais on les décompose encore en 22. Il y a 22 domaines et la personne qui fait sa demande de bourse, dans son formulaire, elle choisit le domaine, par exemple, biologie moléculaire et cellulaire. Puis là, ça veut dire que, bon, moi, biologie moléculaire et cellulaire, j'ai 60 demandes. Un comité, ça va évaluer 20 demandes parce qu'en haut de ça, ils m'en veulent. Donc, je vais avoir 3 comités de biologie moléculaire et cellulaire. Puis là, notre direction des finances va dire, tu donnes tant de bourses. Alors, moi, je vais faire un pourcentage. Je vais dire, OK, ça donne un taux de succès de 33%. Alors, si j'ai 20 demandes de bourse, ben, ça va être 7 bourses, 8 bourses. Qui vont être offertes dans chacun, dans les 3 comités biologie moléculaire et cellulaire. Il y a tout ce qui... Il y en a plusieurs. Je pense que ça donne à peu près 250 évaluateurs pour évaluer 2500 demandes de bourse.
Et normalement, les évaluateurs font partie des universités, des professeurs.
Des professeurs d'université en grande partie. On peut aller chercher des gens qui sont dans l'entreprise privée parce qu'ils ont quand même la connaissance. On essaie d'avoir quand même des gens qui ont un PhD parce qu'on va évaluer des demandes de maîtrise et de PhD. Il faut que la personne qui évalue ait quand même un niveau de formation similaire à la demande qu'elle va évaluer.
Je suppose que vous avez une base de données des professeurs, vous lancez.
Oui.
D'accord, c'est bon, d'accord. Merci beaucoup pour la présentation et pour les questions, pour les réponses.
Merci.
Écoutez. Bon, j'invite maintenant mon collègue, M. Christian Cruz-Sanchez, pour nous donner un bref aperçu des activités futures du comité utilisation des sanctions.
Donc, bonjour, je suis Christian Cruz-Sanchez, spécialiste en régulation économique et chargé de projet du comité de l'utilisation des sanctions à la Régie de l'énergie. Nous voici enfin à la dernière présentation et je vous remercie d'être resté jusqu'à la toute fin. Ainsi, je vais commencer par vous rappeler que l'article 85.11 de la loi sur la Régie de l'énergie stipule notre engagement d'assurer la fiabilité du transport d'électricité à partir des montants perçus à titre des sanctions pécuniaires. La Régie effectue la veille du domaine de la fiabilité pour ainsi développer et offrir des activités aux entités visées par les normes de fiabilité et au secteur dans son ensemble. Cela s'effectue selon 3 axes d'intervention qui sont définis dans la politique sur la gestion des montants perçus à la suite de l'imposition d'une sanction pécuniaire que vous pouvez tout consulter sur notre site Web. Ainsi, je passerai en revue les différentes activités réalisées au courant des années passées, en plus de mentionner quelques activités à venir. Dans le cadre de l'axe relatif à la formation continue des entités visées, la Régie organise des formations sous la formule de webinaires et de séminaires hybrides depuis 2021, tel l'événement actuel. Grâce à la participation de nos nombreux collaborateurs, nous sommes fiers d'offrir l'opportunité aux entités visées d'assister à des présentations pertinentes et d'actualité. De plus, la Régie offre le paiement à l'inscription de formations spécialisées dans une formule privée et à distance. Par le passé, nous avons offert 2 opportunités de formation dispensées par l'organisme spécialisé EUCI, tout en incluant le service d'interprétation simultanée pour suivre les cours en français. En primeur, la Régie annonce son intention de répéter ce type d'activité en offrant à nouveau le paiement aux formations suivantes provenant du même organisme EUCI, donc corrosion des éléments du réseau de transport et de distribution d'électricité, et principe de base des technologies d'amélioration du réseau. Nous avons l'intention de coordonner ces formations lors du premier trimestre 2025 et plus d'informations suivront dans les prochains mois. Ensuite, la Régie a produit des capsules vidéo depuis 2022 pour détailler et fournir des instructions supplémentaires concernant le processus réglementaire, l'accès au SSCQ et les dates inscrites dans les normes et annexes Québec. La Régie a l'intention de continuer la production de capsules vidéo en temps opportun. Pour compléter l'offre des activités offertes selon le premier axe d'intervention, la Régie a également offert le paiement à l'inscription à des conférences d'envergure abordant des sujets liés à la fiabilité. Notamment, les conférences GTD de l'IEEE et les éditions 2022-2023 de GridEx VIII ont fait partie des offres de la Régie. Pour l'édition 2023 de GridEx VIII en mode présentiel à la Ville de Québec, la Régie a offert le service d'interprétation simultanée pour l'ensemble de la conférence. Avant de passer au prochain axe d'intervention, je tenais à vous informer que le solde du compte distinct était de 504 000 $ en date du 1er avril 2024. Pour plus d'informations, vous pouvez vous référer au rapport annuel de la Régie sur notre site Internet. Le deuxième axe d'intervention vise la recherche et l'innovation dans le domaine de la fiabilité du transport d'électricité, notamment par le soutien financier à la recherche fondamentale et appliquée. Comme vous l'aurez remarqué, nos partenaires pour cet axe d'intervention ont eu la gentillesse de venir présenter nos collaborations respectives plus tôt. En premier lieu, nous avons déployé le programme Fiabilité avec l'organisme Innové dans l'optique de financer des projets de recherche collaboratifs créant des liens entre nos institutions de recherche publiques et l'industrie. Au terme du premier appel à projet, des subventions ont été octroyées à 2 projets, permettant ainsi d'ouvrir de nouvelles perspectives pour avancer la modernisation et la résilience du réseau. Nous ne perdons pas de vue l'opportunité de conduire un deuxième appel à projet en temps opportun, et je tiens à remercier Maxime Doucet et Innové pour cette opportunité de collaboration. En deuxième lieu, la Régie a lancé un programme de bourse avec le FRQ depuis 2023. Plus spécifiquement, ce programme de bourse d'études cible les projets de recherche liés à la fiabilité du transport d'électricité, comme on l'a entendu plus tôt. Ainsi, le premier et deuxième appel de candidature a permis de retenir respectivement 3 et 2 boursiers pour leur projet de recherche à la maîtrise. Cet été, la Régie et le FRQ ont eu le plaisir de lancer un troisième appel de candidature pour les étudiants de la maîtrise aux années scolaires 2025-2026, pour lequel l'annonce des résultats est prévue en fin avril 2025. Si vous êtes intéressé à en savoir plus sur les projets de recherche de la première cohorte des boursiers, je vous invite à consulter la page YouTube de la Régie et de chercher les vidéos nommées « Mon projet de recherche en 1 minute ». Ainsi, je tiens à remercier Michel Garceau et FRQ pour cette opportunité de collaboration aussi. Pour votre information, un troisième axe d'intervention concernant l'organisation d'événements et de forums d'échanges, pour lequel nous n'avons pas encore directement organisé et prévu des activités, existe, même si certaines de nos activités, comme l'événement actuel, vont déjà dans ce sens. Donc, ceci conclut l'aperçu des activités réalisées et à ce jour. Avant de vous laisser partir, je veux vous faire part d'une démarche que la Régie a amorcée dans l'objectif d'améliorer ses offres d'activités. Il est important pour la Régie de poser un regard instruit et critique sur la programmation de ces activités en vue d'assurer la fiabilité du transport d'électricité. La Régie a donc retenu les services d'une firme d'études de marché afin de pouvoir évaluer les attentes, la satisfaction et l'impact perçu par vous, les entités visées, à l'égard des activités offertes. Ainsi, vous recevrez bientôt une correspondance détaillant notre démarche, en plus de transmettre à certains heureux élus l'opportunité de participer à une entrevue confidentielle tenue virtuellement afin de partager vos impressions à cet égard. Un sondage web sera également transmis à toutes les entités visées en début 2025. Votre collaboration sera grandement appréciée et la Régie vous encourage à participer à cette démarche. Pour terminer, je vous informe que les présentations, que les enregistrements de l'événement et les réponses aux questions non répondues seront toutes rendues disponibles sur le site web de la Régie au courant des prochaines semaines. Je vous invite à suivre notre compte LinkedIn pour rester à l'affût de ces publications à venir. Ceci conclut ma présentation et le présent séminaire. Je tiens à remercier tous mes collègues de la Régie de l'énergie, nos partenaires du NPCC, NERC, IAISAC, Innové et FRQ, et aussi à nos fournisseurs de services pour la réalisation de ce séminaire. Merci beaucoup et à l'année prochaine.